All right. Oh, so you say hi all to everyone. All right. So you could also type in the chat as well if you're
Hmm.
because you typed in the Google chat. They can't see that. They can only see the live stream chat.
Okay, so let me pull up a separate window here.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah. So you could even pop out the chat as well. I can even give you a link to the chat.
Okay, so hold on, I might look at the chat.
Yeah. Whoops. Okay.
I'm hearing myself. Is that from you?
And you're hearing you'll have to mute it. Yeah. So you'll have to mute that live stream. Yeah. So I'm
No,
recording it.
I'm hearing your YouTube stream.
Yeah. So you'll have to mute that on your. Okay, I muted it just now. Okay, I was probably playing in the background. Is everything fine? Okay, so 9/11 version is there. Timothy Sullivan's in the house. All right, gotta skip the commercial, and let's see.
I'm hearing.
Okay, yeah. So I think audio is fine. Is everyone? Can you guys all hear us fine? And show this. Okay.
I'm hearing your speaking twice. It's not to do my end because I'm on earphones.
Oh, do you have the YouTube opened? Is that why
No,
you're? Yeah. So you have to mute it. So if you have
I
the
don't
YouTube,
have YouTube open.
but you're hearing it twice.
Oh, it might be somehow.
Yeah. So it might
Let
be
me
in the
see.
background in another tab. Okay. So okay, they said they can hear us both loud and clear, and you guys can see us as well. Okay. Christoph Zhang says he can hear us. 9/11 visit us, he can hear us. And yeah, Yin Gazda, yeah, so she's from Austria, and she says,
Hi, Ian.
yeah, all right, great stuff. Okay, so audio's fine for you guys. All right, and yes, can you hear me twice now, or you're good? You're good to go, Bob.
Somehow I think I must have had you in another browser. So yeah.
Yeah, that usually happens on my end as well when I have browsers popping up and I don't know what's going on. All right, and so what I'll do is I'm just gonna go over some housekeeping and then I'll introduce you and go from there. All right,
Hmm.
and yeah, guys, as always, guys, here's the link to the link. So I usually make an article here and then put all the links on it, and also here's my link to my MES links where I put pretty much links to everything, links to the live stream, links to everything. You could put the drop down button and so on. And there is a donate button. Donate, send me a bunch of cash money, and become a super fan, and so on. And then also MES links on Telegram. So I post everything there first, and then afterwards I start sharing it everywhere. And without further ado, I'll read the introduction I wrote on the article. So yeah, so MES Livestream 42. So Bob Greenyer, yeah, from the Martin Fleischmann Memorial Project joins the show to discuss his groundbreaking work on exotic vacuum objects, EVOs, low energy nuclear reactions, or LENR, or cold fusion, and the Hutchison Effect. So without further ado, this is Bob Greenyer, everyone. And yeah, so you want to
Hi
say hi?
guys, welcome.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know whether you want to ask me questions or fire away. I might run over my presentation that I just recently gave at the Cosmic Summit 2024 in North Carolina, which, by the way, I have to say is the best conference I have ever attended by far. And I would say that the reason for that is because of the people that were there. They were absolutely legends, all of them. Really, it was super fun, which I can not really say of any other conference I've been to. It was genuinely fun. There was people from, I think, 48 states, and there was people from many, many countries, something like 20 countries actually there. And then there was another 500 or so online. And so it was really, really good at all ages and a reasonable spread of the available sexes.
Yeah, no, yeah, great. Yeah, I saw a lot of photos of the Cosmic Summit. It looked pretty epic. And John Hutchison actually sent me some photos of you presenting. So I think you might have seen
Right,
that.
right, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, so
yeah.
that was great. So you actually had that presentation. I was actually wanting to get my hands on it. So up to you if you wanted to present some of it or talk about it or whatnot. I just made that link of links on the article just for things we can possibly talk about. But it's gonna be whatever basically we want to do or whatever you want to do, and see what
Yeah.
the audience says and so on. Actually, I want to pull up. So I'll share my screen, and you can also present whenever you want. I'm just gonna share my screen so that you could see what I'm showing them.
Yeah,
So I'm gonna
thank you.
share it right here, and then we can also discuss it. So yeah, you're talking about the Cosmic Summit right here. Here's their Twitter account on this, and then yeah, so this looked pretty epic there, and I'll show the John Hutchison sent these photos. I put them in OneDrive to show the photos, and he said that one of them has had gold in it, had gold in one of the samples. So pop these out. So I'm not sure which one is the one. So there's you presenting. It's just a bit blurry.
That is me presenting. That's me.
Yeah.
Actually, no, that wasn't presenting. That was in a Q&A.
Okay.
And so this is on the after the main presentation. I think it was way more than 100 people, maybe 120 people in the room in my main presentation. This was an exclusive day called the Plasmoid Day, where people could pay for an extra full day where they had access to me. And what I did was I set up a real-time macro. In fact, it's actually on the verge of microscopy, because the camera, along with the LENR 5x lens and the full frame 50 megapixel sensor, is able to see about 0.85 of a micron. But in this scale, I think it's probably seeing around about 4 micron. So I had that table set up there at the back where people could look at Hutchison Effect samples. They could look at samples from my own experimentation. They could look at other MFMP researchers' experiment samples, like the Vega experiment of Henk Urian. And so they could actually really get a really good idea of what these things look, and freeform look at them under the microscope. So I think people appreciated that. And I was able to show, for instance, one of the monopoles on the Bullburn sample from 1986 from John Hutchison, which is on the bottom right there, that little slither, that one there, yeah. Yes. And I could also show a yin-yang structure on that, and people could then throw the light around and see the depth of the impressions that were caused by plasmoid clusters, ball lightning clusters on that particular sample. But particularly the one that I showed there had this kind of like mushroom shape, and it also had a spherical core, which was consumed. And it has substructures in there which are wave-like, which we've identified in other systems. And it had this kind of sphere in there, which I think was predominantly silicon dioxide. So yeah, it's on that image that you're pointing at there, and it's actually almost at the center point of the European Space Agency image. But it's that's it. So you're looking at that one. It's go right. Don't move anything. Move your mouse up and to the right, up to the right. That structure there, right? So they had the ability to see that in beautiful 4K and be able to move a light around and see it in high clarity. So yeah, the circle in there is what I call the Christ center. It's the spherical center of the magnetohydrodynamic structure, which is the phase singularity where matter can collapse in that particular thing. So if you see Tom Bearden talking, I think in the 1990s, about John Hutchison's work, he says that when you get scalar into scalar waves and then they interfere, you get the deposition of monopoles in those particular location. And to the best of my knowledge, that is an example of monopole. If you go to the center left, actually, just there, those two structures there, that's a yin and a yang. They're exactly the same shape. One is a hemisphere, but actually is a kind of hexagon cut out, and it's actually spherical, almost the cutout, even though it's not quite a hexagon. And then onto the left of that, there's actually a mark, which is where that's the yin side, and it's like slapped down. So the matter is destroyed in the yang side and then dumped down onto the yin side. So it's a very, very special sample from my point of view, because it shows a number of the features, and also the actual overall structure there with the big circles. That is the same as a European Space Agency flux loop. Yeah. So you can see it later on, that roundabout there. It's just mirrored because it's on the other pole of the sun, and I had to flip it to make the orientation correct. And then it was later in a video called Protosphere, which was, I think, a 2001 or between 2001 to 2003 proposal for making a better type of fusion reactor than a tokamak. In the latter parts of that Protosphere by the Italian Nuclear Energy Authority, INEA, they showed a diagram of a large plasmoid-like structure ejecting from the sun. And in that, they showed a plasma overall structure, which was effectively a drawing, which would be the projection of the magnetic flux loops exactly from the structure you see on the Hutchison sample and the European Space Agency image you see there. So whilst about 20% of the people commenting on that video that you're looking at there roundly mocked it at the time, it stood the test of time with data that has come before it in plasmoid research, which I was unaware at the time of making that video. So I stand by the conclusions in that video that it is showing a scale invariant plasma self-organized structure, and that is what caused that damage on the top of the ball burn sample, as we call it, which I understand, according to John Hutchison, was from 1986.
All right.
So
epic. Yeah, no, that definitely great presentation there. I want to show this as well. Your video, I think 6 years ago, is showing that sample where you're holding in your hand as well.
Yeah.
I think it's near the end, right over here. Yeah. Oh, we gotta find it. So these are some of the samples John sent you.
Mm-hmm.
Let me just go over. I think yeah, this one right here.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah, it definitely looks next level. So I bought some also from John Hutchison.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so you gave me the wrench. I'm gonna actually bring mine over, or I'll just show you actually on this one here. Hutchison samples. All right, and then also you mentioned that you were actually showing people at the Cosmic one so they can actually use a microscope directly and see the samples up close.
Yeah, so for the people that came to the Plasmoid Day, they were able to handle that particular sample and other selection of samples that we've heavily analyzed with various systems. So for instance, the one called the Coral Twist, and we looked at that under XRF in Sochi in Russia in 2018, and we found that on the outside it had synthesized flux loops where the center of the flux loop had the same elements as each center of each of the flux loops, but the surrounding area had a different mix of elements. And I think it was, like many of these samples, it was predominantly an aluminium, maybe with a bit of magnesium bar stock, and that's the one to the center right there, that one, yes. Mm-hmm. So we call that Coral Twist because it looks like a bit of coral the way it's disintegrated at the ends. And then when it was cut, a section of that, firstly, it took an extremely long time to cut with a new hacksaw blade. It was very, very hard. And actually, when you drop the sample, it sounds much higher than you would imagine for a piece of aluminium bar stock to sound. You would expect it to sound duller and lower. And when we looked at that under the SEM, under the EDX rather, sorry, not under XRF, X-ray fluorescence, it showed normal elements on the outside, but in the center of the material, it was reporting weird elements like technetium and the elements that shouldn't be there. But it was actually not able to properly determine even them. And this was because it was showing spectral lines, that is the characteristic spectra lines, that were not of any element, or rather they didn't have all of the spectral lines of elements. So what this kind of implies is that some of the spectral lines of the electrons, when they're excited and then drop down again, they're meant to give a characteristic X-ray spectrum that is characteristic to that particular element. Well, they weren't giving that element, and they weren't giving any other particular element at all. So this implies that somehow the atomic electron shells were arranged in a different way from naturally. And this has been observed as a bit of a problem in low-energy nuclear reactions, where you can't determine the element that is there because it doesn't follow the standard characteristic X-rays. And one of the ideas for explaining that was proposed in the 2003 paper by Leonid Oritsky. And what that is that these monopoles are bound into magnetic and paramagnetic materials. and they cause the shells to change their orbitals. And so when they are promoted and then demote and release a photon, they don't release the expected photon. And he explained that this was the reason for the weird color that was observed above Chernobyl by the thousands of people in Pripyat when the reactor 4 blew up. Well, post blowing up, of course. And in that case, it was the paramagnetic oxygen that was the key, and the monopoles were binding to the paramagnetic oxygen in the air, changing its spectral emission lines when it was exposed to the gamma and X-rays that were coming from the reactor. It wasn't, in this case, Cherenkov radiation.
Okay, yeah, interesting. Yeah, interesting that you spoke about Chernobyl. I was actually asked from a subscriber. I think you probably met him, Shane Hickel.
Yes, I have met him. Yeah.
Yeah. So he actually said ask you about the Chernobyl incident and an easy to understand summary of what happened. I think EVOs had something to do with it. The blue light paramagnetic oxygen above the reactor, the glow was noted but not fully mainstream explained.
Yeah, so I've explained that, but there's the mainstream theory, which is the accepted one, which is wonderfully dramatized in the HBO documentary. But of course, that is lies and fakery, built on lies and fakery. But it's certainly brilliant television. There's the theory that's published in Bearden's book. I can't remember which one it is. It might be Third Lance, but it might be Oblivion, and it might be in both because he tends to repeat himself. But essentially, what it was, according to Bearden, it wasn't necessarily just this simple reactor test gone wrong. What it was they were using the Duga array, which was 4 kilometers away from the 4th reactor core. And this was a 111 meter over the horizon so-called radar. And according to Bearden, at the time that this was happening, they didn't know what was there because they didn't have satellites at that time. But the idea was, or certainly over that area, the idea was that they had more than one of these things. I think this is Duga 3 or Duga 2 or whatever. It certainly wasn't Duga 1. And these could produce radio waves, extremely long radio frequencies. And of course, if you can do that, you can do it 180 degrees out of phase, which means you can create scalar waves. And with multiple ones of these, you can create scalar interferometry. And the idea was that these were designed not only as an over-the-horizon radar, but also as a scalar weapon. And what was happening was, according to Tom Bearden, was that these things were interacting with the San Andreas fault, and they were observing small earthquakes. And if you can imagine that John Hutchison's metal turns to jelly, and then because it's in this jelly state, it's flexible. Aluminium is the third most abundant element in the Earth's crust. But of course, we've also seen exotic vacuum objects in the case of the LENR reactor, but also in the case of Ken Shoulder's work. We've seen that cause silicon dioxide to turn fluidized, and also aluminium oxide. And if you look at aluminium oxide and silicon oxide, you're talking, well, just oxygen and silicon is 74% of the Earth's crust. If you add the third most abundant element in there, plus X oxides, you're talking about a phenomenal amount of the Earth's crust. Now, what would you do if you had scalar interferometry energizing in a similar way to what you were doing with John Hutchison's material? Well, if you had pressure build up in, say, the San Andreas fault, and you were able to change the rigidity of the rock such that it was partially or wholly fluidized, or it was a situation where you could energize it to a certain point, and it's only when you went through a critical threshold that it phase changed from a solid to a jelly, then at that phase change, you would get all of the energy that was built up over, let's say, 100 years in the San Andreas, released as one gargantuan earthquake. And according to Tom Bearden, this technology was developed first in Russia and then in in Israel. And Israel and Russia were trading earthquakes, but the main target was to hit the San Andreas, and there was going to be this phenomenal number of billions of damage and vast loss of life and injuries in California. And so the military came to Tom Bearden and said, you know, you're the scalar guy. What can we do? And they did calculation. Basically, they had this phase conjugate mirror that is basically like 3M tape or 3M retroreflective road signs, where you can reflect the photons that are coming from the extra low frequency radar and their phase conjugate time reversed waves back to the source, such that rather than attacking the San Andreas fault, it would throw the energy back to wherever it came from, which they didn't know what it was, but they knew the direction it was coming in. And because it's a resonant phenomena, you don't need to have to put all of the energy back. You just have to put enough back in every cycle that's sent, and it will build up and build up because of the Q factor. Now, according to Tom Bearden, he says that there was an accident that happened in one of their nuclear waste sites. Shishkin, who I communicate with regularly, has a different view on that, and it's to do with charged clusters. So they both agree it's charged clusters. But they had an accident that caused, and it's still radioactive today, at the nuclear processing dump site, that caused a massive contamination. This was before Chernobyl. And so they had put in these Duga arrays a defense mechanism where they drained the charge clusters if there was a reverse field into the ground. Well, I don't think they expected the Americans, according to Bearden, to be able to handle this reflection, this retroreflective, this phase conjugated beaming back of the energy, or a proportion of it. And by the time they realized it, they dump the energy into the ground, but this causes a flow of these charge clusters along the surface, and they travel about as fast as the electrons in a wire. I think it's 2 centimeters per minute or whatever. It's not fast. The current travels like near the speed of light, but the actual electrons drift through the wire. Well, these charge clusters did a similar thing, and they drifting through the ground. And I think it's 4 kilometers away. So if you do the maths between the end of the attack, which was reflected back, and the detonation of the reactor, it about lines up. And that's Tom Bearden's theory. But Leonid Uritskev, and I do need to publish this because I'm trying to translate it into English as well. Leonid Uritskev, he thinks that the turbine 4 was shut down, and when it was turned on, there was such a massive back EMF that it caused an immense production of these monopoles, and they went into the water. And his justification for saying that is that they saw glowing orbs inside the reactor, but also there were metal water carrying coolant pipes, and the monopoles had got in there such that the magnetic field was so strong that they were thrown away from each other and blown off the walls. Very, very weird phenomena in there. He describes large chunks of metal intersecting each other. He also describes the fact that the top of the reactor, which inside it has these 30 centimeter by 10 or 20 or 15 centimeter by 15 centimeter graphite blocks, which are the moderators in the RBMK reactor. These are incredibly brittle, and they're also incredibly pure. And what he found was that these things had somehow, the reactor lid, which weighs thousands of tons or whatever, was still on, but somehow the graphite blocks had come out of the reactor, gone up into the sky, landed down on the ground, and hadn't broken, which was absolutely insane. It's like, how could they get out, right? And so there were these large graphite blocks. Now, the other thing was that he actually developed a gamma camera with, and he was mainstream physics, like at the top end of mainstream physics. Leonid Uritskev is alive to this day, but the reason he was doing these reflective presentations recently was because many of the people that were active on the cleanup were dying, and he thought if he didn't say what he knows to be the truth, then it would only be fantasy stories out there, the government fantasy story and the HBO fantasy story, and no one would ever really learn what was interesting about what was observed. So they developed this gamma camera. Now, I don't know if you know, but gamma you basically can't moderate. You can't really stop it. It's so high energy, it just goes through things. And so they actually had to create this weird quantum lens. And the reason it needed to be a quantum lens is because if you just have gamma rays coming into a photosensitive device, it just blooms it out, and you can't get any idea of where the source is. So it actually, they kind of use a lens that looks a bit like a hologram, and it's the same kind of technology but in reverse, that you use for exposing extremely small semiconductors today. So if you actually look at the mask for a semiconductor device these days, they are they don't look anything like the wire tracks that are on there. They actually look like you wouldn't be able to know why they look like they do, because what you're looking for is you're looking for the UV light that's produced often by tin explosions or whatever to expose the semiconductor. You're looking at to have a diffraction pattern through like slits, such that when it hits the semiconductor, it actually exposes it in the correct way. You can't do it by literally having a mask, because if it diffracts around a normal mask, it'll end up with just being a blur on the semiconductor. So it's kind of like that in light, in reverse. You've actually got the light coming through this quantum lens, and then so basically so that's how he had to do it. And he used this whole thing had to be shielded in lead. It was 2 tons, the gamma camera, 2 tons, and it had to be flown just 200 meters above reactor 4. Immense risk for the people involved. And they had to use the world's largest helicopter at the time in order to carry this thing over the reactor. And it was, what they found was there was no core. The core of reactor 4 had disappeared. It wasn't under the reactor. He knows it wasn't under the reactor because he went under the reactor. And he's one of these, he knows many of the people that actually did the digging under the reactor. So the core hadn't melted down. There was no China syndrome, and it wasn't anywhere to be found. What they did find, though, is through the entire of Chernobyl, the graphite blocks, which, as I said to start with, were ultra pure, even completely unbroken graphite blocks. There was a range of synthesized materials, including islands of uranium inside the graphite blocks. You're not going to find this on Wikipedia. You're not going to find it on you're searching all parts of the web where this is not discussed. You're not going to even find it on until I start posting these videos, the translations. You're not even going to find it on any AI, right?
Yeah, definitely.
There's things that aren't known by the circle jerk.
yeah, I'm just showing the
the graphite blocks.
I'm just showing them, yeah, because I haven't studied the Chernobyl one too much, but like like with every narrative.
yeah, I mean the device used these graphite blocks as moderators. That's to slow down the neutrons, and it was a quick and dirty reactor that was really designed to breed plutonium for weapons. So anyway. So you can see there's a bunch of graphite blocks there, but the graphite blocks were ultra pure. They need to be ultra pure. And to cut a block in half and find a range of elements inside that block without the block being broken, and to find actual islands of uranium, it has to have teleported in there. And so that's one thing. And then the second thing is he saw, for instance, a very large piece of equipment that had somehow got from one part of the reactor to another part of the reactor, and there was no physical way it could have done that. There was no gap for it to come through, so it had to have just basically relocated without being physically moved, if you know what I mean, without it interacting with the things that it was moving through, and also intersecting pieces of metal, much like Hutchison Effect going on. So it was observing these things which are not explainable by ordinary physics and accepted physics that forced Leonid Uritsky to become part of the ball lightning and cold nuclear transmutation group in Russia. Basically, impossible things going on with all known ordinary science forced him to look at what the ball lightning and cold nuclear transmutation field, because there was cold nuclear transmutation going on with that reactor core turning into a range of standard elements, and there was weird stuff like things teleporting inside other materials, just as you see in Hutchison Effect going on. Chernobyl is far, far more interesting than the extremely well-produced lies that are in the HBO documentary, which I rather enjoyed.
Yeah, definitely. What was the name of that? How do you spell that person's name? I just
Leonid Orezkiev.
so
L-I-U-R.
L-I-U-R.
Orezkiev.
Oh, I think it shows up. L-U. Ludmila. No, that's not it.
No. Leonid. So yeah, Leonid.
O-N-I-D.
Yeah, space. U-R. U. Urut. Yeah, T-S-K-I-V.
I-K-I-V, and then just no E. Okay.
No, yeah.
Yeah, I just want to keep it just for reference, because some of these names are not easy.
Yeah.
This guy here, okay.
No, this
that's
is
not it. It looks like a movie.
documentary. No, that's just looking at. Just get rid of Chernobyl.
Okay. Yeah, that's probably it. Okay, Leonard.
It gets swamped by trash.
Yeah. Or maybe if I do, but that's exact spelling, just to make sure it's correct.
Koyev, O-E-V rather at the end.
O-V-E?
No. Urut's K-O-E-V.
O-E-V. Okay.
Yeah.
That might be it. And then, yeah, his research. Okay.
There you go.
Urut's research work.
You'll see lots of research into monopoles.
Oh, this guy.
That's the guy. In fact, there's a video there. That's him speaking at one of the Russian conferences. I took that video myself. That's on the MFMP's channel. The one below is a video that might be him talking to me.
Oh, okay. No,
yeah,
that's great stuff. Yeah,
that's Leonid Orezkiev.
Let's see if I can pull it up. Yeah, it's right here talking to you. All right. Some inception going on. So you're talking about him, and now there's a video of you talking to him.
Yeah.
On the channel. That's great. Yeah, and yes, we talked to him. I wanted to actually. There's some questions in the chat, but first I want to point out. So Yin Gazd she took the photos apparently, according to the screenshot.
Yeah, she's a very good photojournalist.
Yeah, so because I saw the name just now, like when I was
yeah
discussing it, and then here was some questions, and especially when you're talking about mainstream science. So James SS asks, what do you think of the structured atomic model and how accurate?
So I've met Carl and his colleague. I think it's interesting. I think like a lot of these models, it falls apart at the far ends. It doesn't include neutrinos, which I believe have a really good basis for being in matter. But from my point of view, I just don't see atoms as little spheres, although a lot of the universe is in spheres. I don't kind of see them as a lump of discrete spheres. So personally for me, I think it's better than some models. I kind of prefer the model of what's his name? Pavel Ozmira, who has a whole model based on toroids. And since toroids are, a sphere can form as a field around a toroid, but I think the toroid has to be the core structure, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So if you look up Pavel Ozmira.
Pavel, would it be on your channel as well? Or
yeah, there's a discussion of his theory there. So, but just go space and Ozmira, O-S-M-E-R-A.
O-S-M-E-R-A. Ozmira.
Yeah, Ozmira. Yeah.
No, definitely. All right. Yeah. So there's speaking of atomic model or just a general model of there's a Einol Dinu and Fractal Woman. I think you've interacted with Lori Garden.
Yeah.
So they have
great researcher. Yeah.
Yeah. So they have the incompressible fluid model of the ether, and just explaining electromagnetism and so on. It has some very interesting mechanical properties. Like you're basically describing it in mechanical terms, electromagnetism?
Yeah, I think we need to get back to that kind of traditional mechanical view. Certainly, if you look at my thinking on how these fractal toroidal structures form, they are basic hydrodynamics, which become magnetohydrodynamics, and so it's what you call classical physics rather than quantum physics.
Yeah, definitely. And this other part I want to discuss here before I see before we go back on a links article or questions in the chat. Just wondering if you so Fractal, she discussed how the mainstream physics, they like when they define a photon, they define it per 1 second, but then they leave out the second. So then you have all of these quantum floating like photons. So they say, I have a drawing right here.
Yeah, well, Matthew, I'll just say, from my point of view, if I can't see it, I don't believe it, right? So you start throwing equations at me, and I see equations, and the equations might work, and they might be very elegant, they might be self-significant, self-certifying, if you know what I mean. They verify themselves. But from my point of view, I kind of like I walked away from. I mean, it's not that they don't have their place, but you need to be able to intuitively see what's going on, and the whole problem with actual what is the structure of an atom is it's such a freaking small thing, the core of an atom, right? Mm-hmm. that like, you know, if you replace, as I said in my lectures in North Carolina, if you take the whole Earth and you make it into a black hole, it's like 12 millimeters across. Yeah. You know, there's not a lot of matter in terms of volume in the space of a central atom. Now, they're starting to say that they can image an electron, and they're starting to say even that they can image a proton. But when you look at these things, that they just look like wave fields and wave interaction, you know, interference fields. They don't look like a circle. I mean, you can see these images of gold atoms using certain types of what do you call it? Not transmission electron microscopes. The ones that have a little tip. And anyway, but they still look like spheres because you're just seeing the charge boundary coming back, and so you can see the lattice structure, but you're not actually seeing the actual inside of the nucleus. You're seeing the interaction of electrons with the outside of the atom's electron structure, if you know what I mean, and you're seeing a boundary of that.
Yeah, no, yeah, definitely. Like even the mainstream, even when you look at their mainstream theory, they say even that electrons, like around the nucleus, it's not actually a particle or even a wave. They say it's a probabilistic cloud of electrons. So it's a mathematical.
Yeah, and look at the third word there. It's theoretical.
Yeah, it's a theoretical.
So like, if you can't see it, it didn't happen. I mean, it's a nice thing to discuss. And what I like about, you know, Ido Karl's and his colleagues' model, and also Pavel Osmira, and also the Mills models, is that these models try to address from a kind of building block principle, and in the case of Mills, from a mathematical principle, why electron shells are in the way they are, or rather, why chemical bonds are the particular angles that they are, these kind of things. And that's great. But you know, chemistry is interesting for me. I got taught 3 different types of chemistry: GCSE, A level, and university level, and each one said the previous one was wrong. So it's like I could keep doing this with chemistry, and every time I learn a bit deeper, it's going to be wrong again. So like, what's the point? So I looked at something that I was told to look at: gamma, X-rays, neutrons, and beta particles as a signature of anything nuclear going on. And I tried to do that for a few years, and certainly we saw some interesting effects. We did see what would be claimed to be neutrons in one experiment, not many. We did see what was maybe described by the French Nuclear Authority as a beta burst in GS 5.2. And we saw something that we explained initially as being gamma in what we called gamma experiment, which was with Celani cells in 2013. However, I don't think any of those things are correct, and because of the particular nature of the radiation, how it occurred, and what other things it did, like stopping pieces of equipment working and things like this. So I kind of like walked away from what I was being told to look for, and I took on board a suggestion by Francesco Piantelli in January 2015 when we were with him. He said, "Don't tell nature what it is, let it show you." Mm-hmm. And so from that point on, I changed my approach to this science and said, look, if I can't see it, it didn't happen. Or conversely, if something did happen, let's see what we can see happened. And from taking that approach, you see physical structures that were not there in the original starting materials, but more importantly, not only these structures, but also you can see that within particular event horizons, you see affected material and completely unaffected material. And it really is a hard line. And then there are substructures within there where you see different things happening. And in those structures, that is where you see all the elements being made, either the heavier or lighter elements than the starting materials. And if you've got heavier and lighter elements than the starting materials that cannot be detected in the raw material, then they've either been able to be teleported in there by some sort of aggregation system and or contamination concentration system, or there really is genuinely transmutation going on.
Yeah, no, definitely. And also when you said that when they even try to look at the particles in the atomic model, it just looks like electromagnetism.
Yeah.
And an example of that again is the fractal woman one. So the top right here, I don't know if you've seen this or not. This is from one of her videos. So the top is supposedly is one of the shells of an atomic orbital. So that's an electron's probability shell.
Yeah.
And then the second
one, if you get a bunch of magnets and you put them together,
yeah,
and you get one of those zinc
that's what I'm showing. Yeah. So the
magneviews over the top, it ends up looking just like that.
Yeah. So the bottom is just a magnet. The bottom is magnets. The top is the electron orbitals. And the shape around this is the isopotential lines, basically the equal magnetic strengths, and they all just match up.
I've sat there with some Magnaview paper with a bunch of magnets, and in fact, if you look at my podcasts, if you go to any of my podcasts on remoteview.iacu, where it's just a podcast, the actual logo is the third one along there, the 3D structure.
Yeah, let's see how do I?
So go to last podcast, which I don't know which one that was actually.
I'm on it. I just don't know how do I get to podcast?
If you're a subscriber, you can click on "Don't Miss This." But
is it paid subscriber, or how do I?
If you're a paid subscriber, you can click on "Don't Miss This." But I think my latest podcast might have been the one on O. Might have been on O. Just go back. It's just there, down that one, up there, up, down there, up. No, the other up, which is down. Okay. It's the letter O in a pot.
This one here. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Because when you said up, then down.
I really mean it. Look at the top left. Look at the top left. Go up.
Oh, there. This one, top left. Yeah. That's the logo. There.
That's 4 magnets on some Magnaview paper.
Yeah, and it looks just like So that's the thing. The isopotential lines. It's pretty much that's pretty much what the orbitals are. So it's like a very, very fine line between magnetism. Yeah, and even then, it's like magnetism not even explained that well either. But again, going back to this part, this one, it's a fractal one. The equations. So even when you said that you could put an equation to see if they work or not, but what she shows, the equation itself of quantum mechanics is flawed itself. Mm-hmm. So, like for example, the Planck's length. So the energy equals to Planck's length times frequency. That's basically a photon. Mm-hmm. They ignore that there is the units don't add up. So because you have frequency they ignore this term cycle. See this cycle? Mm-hmm. So then the units don't actually cancel. So this equation doesn't equate to joules energy. It equates to joules cycle.
Yeah.
So basically, the interpretation of from this viewpoint, when you're ignoring the units, you end up having quantum particles such as they'll say every single frequency like every 1 second of it is going to be one photon, because they ignore the cycle. And then if you just add the cycle on there, what ends up happening is every single frequency based on Fractal Woman's interpretation, and I think correct interpretation. So basically, if you have gamma rays, if you have visible light, radio frequencies, any of them, they'll all be made of the exact same minimum energy unit. And that's what Planck's constant, according to her interpretation, is. It's just one energy unit. So then a high frequency gamma ray would just have many of those many of those energy units. But in mainstream, it would take this 1 second of time and say that's a photon. So I think I have an illustration of it. I just wanted to.
Yeah, and I just yeah, but then they're getting around it by saying that the photon has a higher energy at a higher frequency.
Well, it's the higher intensity, so it's just because it's you'll have more of these energy units per.
Yeah, it's the number of same velocity bullets hitting in a period of time.
Yeah, so with the higher energy, it's higher intensity. It's basically higher per. They have more of these, so higher energy has more of this. Mm-hmm. And a good illustration of how the mainstream views it. I gotta find my. I showed it right over Planck's constant. Video on Planck's constant. I made one years ago, way back. I'll find that as we sort it through. I don't know. So, anyways, going further, I'll read the one comment and I'll get back to that other stuff once I find the article I made. This comment actually. So do you know Jeremy Rees or Alien Scientist? I think you are.
I do, and I almost give him credit in nearly every presentation I give at the moment, because he did a sort of Lord Kelvin type smoke ring, but he used a spread beam laser to show the density of the flow as a section through that, and it's one of the key images that I use. I have been on APEC meetings where he's been there as a listener, and I've listened to him being a speaker, but I've never actually interacted with him. Actually, I would like to, but yeah. Okay. I know he has certain views on things that I'm not wholly agreeing with, and vice versa. That's fine. You know, you need a diversity of opinion to iterate to any truth.
Yeah, definitely, because I think he either used to or still does view Hutchison Effect as a hoax. I think, or at least he used to.
That's fine. I mean, John was how should we put this? Eager to please in certain instances where people put pressure on him to perform, and he did tests that then you know, or demonstrations that were not quite what the Hutchison effect that I'm interested in, and so that's just the reality. You know, even performers do that. So what can you say?
Yeah, I think you may be speaking about that Murray guy, because I saw one of your comments on the Hutchison effect. Because
well, here's the thing. You know, I couldn't run before I could walk, and I couldn't walk before I could crawl, and for someone to come along, and also I make mistakes, and I know pretty much everyone does make mistakes. I'm sure there's some perfect people out there and say, hold on a minute, I'm perfect, right? But I know I'm not. And
Anthony
the
Fauci
idea
comes
that
to mind, sorry.
Sorry, what?
No, I said Anthony Fauci comes to mind.
Clearly he's perfect. Yeah, even the bad things he did them perfectly. But here's the thing that.
Yeah, Fauci as a painting of himself.
Oh, I know, what a narcissist. Honestly, it's just ridiculous, isn't it?
And he says he's Mr. Science. So.
I know. The very first time I saw Fauci, or I recognized the name with him, was him stepping forward in front of Trump when Trump said using ivermectin, and he kind of barged Trump out of the way and stood up there and said, we haven't done any studies on that. And I thought, I learned very early on in my childhood to learn when someone is lying, and everything in his face was lying. I had to save that. I literally started recording that video. I said, this guy is lying. I don't know who he is, what his credentials are, what he's responsible for, but I'm never going to trust another thing that comes out of this guy's mouth. And that's the very first time I saw him.
Yeah.
Was that at the podium in the White House? Yeah. So, like, you know, I don't understand why more people don't immediately click. Maybe they didn't go through what I had to go through to be able to read people's inability to lie. Right? They have certain tells, and just for me, it was 100% lie. Anyway, what was I talking about before? She was thrown into
it
the
was
mix.
about Jeremy Reese, alien scientist, and then also the Murray the quote.
Oh yes, so
Hutchison Effect.
The thing is for someone to come out and say this particular thing, which I don't even think was done by John, but he used that as a demonstration. Discredits everything else that someone's done. That's like saying, the Josephson effect does not exist because Brian Josephson believes in telepathy.
No, I understand, but I think there's even more to that because I actually.
Oh no. Well, the thing is,
No.
When someone has invented a quick way to make graphene and graphene supercapacitors, no one descends on you faster than military organizations. Now, I'm not saying this has happened, but those same military organizations have interests in certain other things not becoming so well known. That's where I'll leave.
But what I'm trying to point is the footage that's being used to quote debunk Hutchison. They actually muted the audio. Hutchison.
Oh, I know. And John says, I've got a wire here, and I'm doing something like the Townsend Brown effect. Yeah, I know all about it.
Yeah, so
it's totally deceptive.
Those are the ones they mute. Yeah.
I immediately challenged him both on that and on the one on cold fusion, and he did these two videos within a couple of weeks each other. So I knew he was personally attacking me, or at least that's what it felt like. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe I think too much of myself, but probably. But it was weird how so and he got his name wrong for a start, which is like, but he did at least correct it. I made the same mistake. He had the Hutchison effect. And I said, well, if you want to talk about Hutchison, you need to get his name right type thing. But, the interesting thing is my speculation was he was put up to this by the US Navy.
Oh, definitely.
And I challenged him on that, and I challenged him on his cold fusion talk. And who came onto my blog a couple of days later after the second challenge was a guy who in 1992 between 1990 and 1992 was nominated to be on the board of safety in nuclear science for the US Navy. He admits he's a US Navy researcher. He worked on US Navy nuclear reactors for submarines, and he came on and full attacked me. So here's me thinking privately in the back of my head that the US Navy has put this guy up because I was being fairly effective on YouTube but trying to keep my subscriber numbers low. And this guy with a much bigger flat platform on which a large proportion of my viewers also subscribe suddenly pops up and makes two random videos, one on low energy nuclear reactions and one on this. So, so I challenged him on both to an open debate, a live stream debate, and he was too chicken to even reply. But he did. I know he saw the post because he changed the name of John Hutchison from Hutchinson to Hutchison correctly. So he took my correction that he wouldn't, and he doesn't need to because he's done his disinformation and he's thrown it out there. The interesting thing is when I was thinking he was put up to this by the US Navy, was the US Navy attack dog who had never spoken to me at all, ever. But I was aware of his attacking other people in the field in the past. He then came out and attacked me on my blog. And it was just laughable. It was like, are you definitely trying to tell me it's the US Navy?
Yeah. Well, I think it definitely this guy's a government agent and.
Well, I don't know whether he's a government agent
or something like that.
Let's not go there. I think what it is, he's got a large platform, and people have to earn money, don't they? So maybe he did it because he really likes putting other things down, and he just likes doing a one video hit piece,
But it's specifically it's a specific cold fusion and then Hutchison effect, and then does not change
within a few weeks. And I am probably one of the most prominent people that connects those two.
I actually
And
I actually didn't see the cold fusion part until you mentioned it just now. I didn't know he made
and
one on.
they are within weeks of each other.
Yeah, in April 21, 2022. All right, so this is yeah. And so, well, the reason I think he's an agent or an asset or something because in the Hutchison video, so he mutes the audio,
Oh, I know.
but he also says what the audio, but he also mentions he's like, oh, this I'm just talking about high voltage wires and whatnot. So he actually like said what was being muted. Uh, but like in a way to debunk the Hutchison effect. So
I mean, essentially what he said was T. Townsend Brown was a faker.
oh, but he wasn't talking about Townsend Brown.
I know he
Yeah,
wasn't,
yeah,
but he was saying that if someone has a high voltage wire
yeah,
attached to a bit of metal and it's moving around, then they're obviously faking stuff.
yeah, yeah. But the thing is, so the wire, it was obvious in the video, and then but then he also so basically what my point is, he was saying what was muted. So he mutes the audio, but
Yeah.
he also said what was muted in his dialogue. Because
Listen, I don't know how much value you can get
yeah.
out of producing of over analyzing a disinformation propaganda person, because
No,
he also had to go with the thunderstorm generator. He's following me around like a bad smell,
yeah,
right?
and
So either that or some of the people that subscribe to my channel follow his channel, which I that is known. I know because when I look at my YouTube thing, it says people who follow you also follow
yeah, definitely.
Robert Murray Smith.
But like, and the point there, going even further. So if you were sharing Hutchison effect videos, and if they go viral, you'll like one of them got a community note.
Yeah,
So they would say that this is disinfo, and they would link to Rational Wiki, and Rational Wiki references the muted video, the muted
right.
audio, but they don't say muted audio. So it's like they use the same fake debunkers. Like also Ace Baker was the original one who made that.
Yeah, of course. You see that piece of jelly aluminium that's in that frame there.
Yeah.
You also have the same thing going on with it, Tom Bearden visiting people on the periphery of the Soviet energetics program, where they had electromagnetic equipment in the environment, and they were able to turn a metal, presumably aluminium, to jelly, and they were able to push it into a mold and then discharge it and set solid again. And this was then taken to London, demonstrated in London, and then the Union of Soviet Republics then reclassified that research. Also, in that same visit, they observed many kilowatts of power being transmitted over an 8-micron wire and illuminating something like 25 kilowatts of light bulbs. And that was later, actually, I don't think that was reclassified. And this is cold electricity. And this was also observed and published by Dr. Takaaki Matsumoto, who I met last year before he died, sadly. He also was able to observe this ball lightning structure. And I've explained that in my Stichin presentation from last year, how that works. You get a charge cluster, and it uses the wire guide as a guide for the so-called ball lightning to travel down. And then it dumps the electrons when it goes, in my view, through the small inductance of the coils in the tungsten filament light bulb. And then it re-emits the electrons are there to do their work when they get to the tungsten filament at the other end. Yeah. So this was actually in a video, I think in 2001 or to 2003 period, which was on a news program in Russia. So that didn't get reclassified for some reason. But the other thing was reclassified. And so this is metal softening using electromagnetic waves. And there's also that guy called Ralph Ring, who was associated with TL Carr with that so-called anti-gravity craft. And he talks about when he first met them after basically seeming to be an appropriate person to be entered into their group. They turned on this electromagnetic equipment. He said he describes himself as feeling a cool wind, something that John Hutchison often said when he was running his equipment. He would feel this cool wind. And this aluminium prototype of the so-called UFO was out in front of him, and he was able to put his hand into the aluminium frame, and it was cold, but it deformed around his hand just as the aluminium bar stock did when John Hutchison's colleague went to touch it shortly after it was glowing yellow-orange, and he was able to leave his fingerprints in that. And this is not the only case, because I was describing a number of these cases of aluminium becoming effectively jelly-like with one of the world's experts in ball lining in India, when I was there with him evaluating the work of Suhas Ralkar. And he told me about this example that he was told during his ball lightning research, where this train, I think it was in Hungary, was going along the train tracks, and the ball lightning came down by the side of the train carriage, and it touched the window frame, which happened to be made of aluminium. So typically you got like a steel or a wooden cabin, and then you would have I think it was probably wooden, and then you had an aluminium frame, and the glass was in there, okay, maybe with some sort of rubber interface between the glass and the aluminium. But what this guy described was, after the ball lightning had touched the window frame of this train carriage, that he was able to manipulate the aluminium with his fingers for about 20 minutes before it set solid again. So this is, in my view, a known effect. It's been, I would agree, weaponized. I think when you see these so-called laser devices by Raytheon or Lockheed Martin, they're so-called hitting these drones, and it's making the back of the drones, tail fin glow orange. That's not a laser, because it's not heat. Because if you had heat and you've got the things traveling at 400 or 500 miles an hour, well, the cooling effect of 400 or 500 miles an hour over that piece of aluminium is going to be phenomenal, right? Mm-hmm. But if you're changing the way the electrons behave and turning to a jelly, then you can imagine that the tail fin would pop straight off, because you're losing the structural integrity. It's non-thermal fluidization. Non-thermal fluidization. I'm not saying it's melted per se, because melted gives the impression that it's a thermal process, right? It's turned into a jelly, so it loses structural integrity. Okay. So I think there's many examples of this, and so for me that's a done deal. And when I have that sample that I showed at the conference that you showed a picture earlier, and it was the coral twist there on the center line that you've got there, that is a cold effect, and the one behind that is what I call the knee, which you can see in the background above that. That is iron, and so in the case of aluminium, it bends in a sort of more jelly-like way. It's more smooth curves, whereas iron tends to fragment. The reason being is that the monopoles can kind of move around in the paramagnetic aluminium. They more care about coalescing with themselves, whereas in the iron, they get locked into place, and when they grow in place, their fields push themselves apart and it breaks like that. And it's very interesting, because that's what I described when I realized what was going on. And then a number of years later, I was sent a video by Tom Bearden, which says exactly that description. The fields are the non-radiating boundaries, as I call them, where no electromagnetic waves escape, but the scalar and vector potentials do. When these structures grow and they go to the next quantization, they snap to the next quantization, they snap to the next quantization. When they're in iron and they're locked in place, when they get they push it apart and it just tears the metal. There's nothing that can stop this, nothing. And his actual description was specifically referring to the large iron billet, which is, I think I actually have samples here that were given to me by, I think it's somewhere in this drawer. No, maybe I've got it in my samples container. These were the fragments that, in a very famous video, John's sitting like kind of cross-legged on the floor, and he's describing this large bar with some fragments down to the bottom, and he says it's been looked at by the Max Planck Institute, and it was looked at by George Hathaway. Well, when I was with George Hathaway, he gave me some of that sample very graciously, and I analyzed that a few days before I gave my Szczecin presentation last year. And I've talked about it since, and it will be in the book, which will be called Mr. Possible. It'll actually be a couple of books. One will be a very small potted history of what made Mr. Possible up to 1992, and the rest will be a kind of what we know about the effect and how it can maybe occur. And then the second one will be a color book. Yeah, so this is the one. So he describes these samples on the floor, and so it's that sample. Now I looked on that, and I actually have the 4,800 DPI scans that I took of George Hathaway's original scanning electron microscope slides of those fragments. Okay. And it's exactly as Tom Bearden's describing in that 1990s video. And I have, though, my SEMs take what was observed by George Hathaway to the max, because his SEM was a much older device, and the way you used it was, it was primitive by comparison to modern devices. But I verified what was observed by George Hathaway, what was observed by the Max Planck Institute, and what was described in that video by Tom Bearden. It is as it is said. And he actually says it tears the metal like in Venetian blinds, and it literally looks like that. It's like looks like a sheet of Venetian blinds, where it's just pushed it apart.
Yeah, definitely. And speaking about that, you had that SEM and the I think you've done spectroscopy. That's how to pronounce. On the samples, I was wondering, do you have any before and after, like just images of the sample, like the sample before the Hutchison effect or away from it, and then afterwards? Do you have images of
well, John hasn't verified. Oh, what? So like where the Hutchison effect occurred and around,
and then
away
around
from
it, then compare it to around it.
Well, I mean, I can actually show you, if I share my screen, I can show you a couple of slides. So what I did is on the 11th of June, this very month, 2024, I looked at what I call the Hutchison sword in the stone. I think it's also shown in that video there. It's the knife that sank into an aluminium block. Now, previously, I had suggested, in part because Ken Shoulders, a comment by Ken Shoulders. So Ken Shoulders said that exotic vacuum objects can enshroud things. It can coat, it can basically cover something and mask it. And so I was suggesting that, yeah, so this is
this is the video. This is the sword in the stone one.
Yeah, so I actually got some microscopy there, but the SEM wasn't, the EDS wasn't working that day, so I didn't have time to look at that. So I've looked at that in more detail, and I'll just show a couple of slides in a minute. Yeah. But two things. One thing is that a typical size of these structures are around about 20 microns. So that's one thing. The second thing is they form in yin-yang pairs, and the yang tends to have a hole in it, and the yin, it's kind of like the opposite of what you would think, because the yang actually destroys. I used to call them in reverse, but the yang actually consumes matter in its core. It like turns it into other stuff, whereas anyway, one's one, one's the other. That one is an outie and one has an innie. You can debate which one's what, but there's two types, and you see this over a number of different Hutchison samples, and not just in Hutchison samples. But anyway, and then there's another signature of the effect, which I call the iron-rich crenellated microsphere, which we have seen in a wide range of LENR active reactors. And it's not necessarily the iron is synthesized. It's just that the magnetic core, the phase singularity of what I call a fractal toroidal moment cluster, the structure, is so intense. I mean, it's well more than 1,000 Teslas, right? So like if you go in to have an MRI scan, which might be around about 1 to 4 Tesla, yeah, they ask you to remove every piece of metal from your body, right? No electronic items, all the metal, right? So if you can imagine something that's around about 1 Tesla, requesting you to remove all items of metal, what's 1,000 or 1,300 Tesla going to be, right? Well, it's much more than that. So people have calculated, like Lutz Yeatner at ICCF 22 in 2019, that I think it's a 5 or 20 micron, I think it's a 5 micron exotic vacuum object has a magnetic field of 5 orders of magnitude stronger than the center of our sun. The magnetic pressure is 5 orders of magnitude more than the center of our sun, which is equivalent to that inside a pulsar, which is a type of neutron star. Okay, so these are phenomenal, unimaginable levels of magnetic pressure. And what it appears to do is it has this beam that comes down, and the beam that comes down is a disruptive beam. And I think it's akin to the Podkletnov disruptive beam, where he had superconductors and he span them around a very high speed. And it produced a beam behind it where materials interacted and went into each other. This disruptive beam, I believe, is messing with the structure of the physical vacuum, so that normal matter kind of loses its ordered state and can blend into each other. And this is partly what's going on, in my view, in the Hutchison effect. But that is the base of the kind of yin force that then pulls into this magnetic core. And in the magnetic core, you can either have the north or south magnetic core, but it's essentially one winds and the other one unwinds. The north unwinds and the south winds matter. So one is kind of like it's kind of like a white hole. That would be the unwinding one, and the winding one is like a black hole kind of thing. But anyway, the actual core of that, it ends up looking like it's hollow typically, but the outside is a micron to micron and a half, maybe 2 micron. It has a fully kind of glassy, like iron and oxygen layer on the inside, which is about micron and a half sometimes. And then there's another chunk on the outside, which when the overall spheres get beyond about 2.5 to 3 micron, they start to present crenellations. And what do I mean by that? I mean they are a bit like the surface of a brain, for instance. They look a bit like that. If they're just pure iron and oxygen, if they've got chromium in there, which that is a tell that it's come from the steel, then they tend to have more dendritic crystals, but they're still a sphere. They're not dendritic crystals growing in the way that a dendritic crystal would ordinarily grow. They're dendritic crystals that are folded into a sphere, right? Which, you know, you have to think about, why is it doing that? It's not like a crystal wants to grow in its crystal planes, right? It doesn't want to grow rounding lovely smooth curves, right? So that someone would look at that, give it a cursory glance and go, oh, it's dendritic crystals, but they're not clocking the fact that it's in a sphere. Okay, so when you've got that for me is a signature. So now I'm going to share, if I may, a couple of slides from my presentation that I gave in North Carolina, because I was going to share this in North Carolina, and it was one of my potential overall experiments to pieces of research to share. But then John Hutchison had a health scare the day after I took this media, and it was like, I have to put something in because John has to see this because it's one of his most famous samples. So just to recap, I said that essentially you have a knife and the aluminium. We know that these structures, yeah, so yeah, that in that presentation you're referring to, it's the Bible fused with metal on 9/11. It's just hilarious. And it's open on the eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth section.
Yeah, yeah. So because someone was asking, 9/11 revisionists asking you to show a picture of the Bible found at Ground Zero, and what's your opinion on it?
Well, I've already done a picture. I call it The Inconvenient Truth. You can go and look at my Steemit blog from about 6 or 7 years ago where I refer to it. I think I call it, there's a video called Inconvenient Truth on the Martin Fleischmann Memorial Project.
Okay. Yeah, I was actually looking for your Steemit profile because I remember, but I couldn't find it because I don't use Steemit anymore.
So it's steemit.com/@homosymbion.
Okay, that's what it was. I was wondering.
Yeah, I set up this website long before I did research because I believe humans will have to become symbiotic with the planet. Oops. Now, you have to spell it right. So it's at and then HOMOSY SYMBION.com. Or no, you don't need the dot. You don't need sim. You need an at before the Homo symbiont.
Oh yeah, that's right.
At Homo SYMBION. I think that's it.
Okay, yeah, because I remember we did interact a bit years ago.
Yeah.
Because so I have a Steemit account as well, but then they forked to Hive. They had it was actually some Binance, the big crypto exchange.
Yeah, so they changed. What I hated is they started putting adverts on there, so I decided to move away because I just fundamentally I don't like people having to consume things with adverts.
Okay.
So
Well, that's the thing. It's the thing about Steam. It's a
I also wanted something that was caught in the blockchain. This for me was ideal. It means that when I've said something, so for instance, I predicted that they would try some sort of bioweapon 2 years before they did.
Oh wow. And I think here disease induction in electromagnetic biological warfare, and then this was 20. Yeah, this is 2017, I think. Let's see the date on this. Oh, 2019. You posted. All right.
Yeah. I knew it was coming, you see.
Yeah, and you also, I think I got it from here. You posted the anti-gravity flyer.
Yeah.
And
I actually tried to reach out to him to do a replication there.
okay, so this is 9/11 and LENR, and I think was it? Where's the Bible one in here? Yeah,
No, the Bible one's in there separately. So if you go back, I think it's called An Inconvenient Truth or something.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is on the blockchain, but the thing is like I was saying, this got taken over by billion-dollar blockchain.
Yeah, a guy in South Korea. Anyway, back to the story. So
Yeah,
basically, I'm saying at the time when I was doing my initial review of what I call the Sword and the Stone, that I'm going to return.
I found it.
Yes. Yeah. So that's my blog, and I talk about the burning temperature, and I show John Hutchison samples in there where the wood is not burned on the boundary. I call inconvenient reality. There you go.
Yeah.
So there's John Hutchison's wood where it's not burnt on the boundary layer.
And then zoom. Okay. Yeah, it's not burnt on the boundary, and I think this was from.
Yeah, so I talk about the.
Is this your account or is this someone else's account? This is your.
No, that's someone else's, and that is the Oversober is the actual owner of that sample. So I do want to get him involved with the book, so that those samples can be part of the book.
Yeah, he's been.
I think he's a guy in. I think he's a guy in LA actually.
Yeah, because he's been on the live stream chat. It was.
All right. Well, if you can reach out to him and get to him before I do, that would be helpful.
Yeah, because you're writing a book, right? If you can.
So like I say, I'm going to write. It's called Mr. Possible and the Hutchison Effect. So Mr. Possible is what made John uniquely possible to both find this effect and then subsequently publish it in whatever way that he did. You can see the temperatures there. I say the paper ignites or at a certain temperature, and steel kind of softens at a particular temperature. So what you're seeing there is normally impossible.
Oh wow! Yeah, no, definitely, yeah, because it's paper and this is steel. How do you?
It's not even brown.
Yeah.
You know, it's not even singed.
And then this part here, it looks like it was just ripped over here, and then the edges of some of them seem tiny bit singed, but. This is ripped. It's a steel melting around this, and then apparently this is at the museum as well, and they were.
Yeah, I know.
And go on.
I would suggest to anyone who thinks that their PhD is worth more than soiled toilet paper. I think there's some sort of emergency truck in there that's got a bit of a hole in the side of it, and I would ask them to seek to get a sample. From the boundary layer of that hole and look at it under the microscope. And I think it's an aluminium wall to that. And I think that they will find that there are very particular magnesium and silicon structures in there with potentially iron. I think it might be a different type of vehicle. It might not be a fire truck. It might.
So here's a fire truck as well. No,
yeah, that's.
I have a bunch of this.
Yeah, but that actually can look like fire. So I burnt quite a few things that are made of aluminium. Like we used to have a caravan site, and we used to have these caravans we'd buy for 400 quid. We'd rent them out for about 5 years, and then when they were shot to pieces, my father would let us, let's say, break them down for scrap, and sometimes we would break them down and take the aluminium to the scrap heap, and other times we would Molotov cocktail them, and we would see what would happen.
Wouldn't that be steel? Wouldn't that be steel instead of aluminum? This right here.
That would typically be aluminium, but no, it might be steel.
I don't know. Yeah, it's a fire truck. I'm not sure.
Fire truck. It might be steel, but anyway, that can look like fire damage there. So, you know.
And then this one here was somehow crumbled, not just.
Well, it might have had something drop on it. You need to see the full timeline for these things, and that's
this one here. It looks like it was melted in the front, the whole
yeah,
entrance. I don't know even know what this is.
yeah.
They showed this at the, and look, the door is fine.
Yeah, I can't laugh at these things because people did actually die. You know,
Yeah,
but
it's more about the mainstream narrative. Like they expect that Osama did this.
well, yeah, that's a whole other story.
Yeah.
All right, so what I'm trying to say is that either the aluminium block billet got covered with these things, and we know that it probably did because of Alec Pizarro's fingerprints in another billet of iron. So we know 100% that aluminium gets covered on the outside with these things. Potentially also the iron did as well. Now, if you can imagine, you've got loads of little micro machines, and they're either attached to the knife or there's a plethora of them on the aluminium. Let's say they're on the aluminium. Well, because that's paramagnetic and the iron has, and the steel has iron in it, that has islands of iron which are highly magnetic. These things that are on the aluminium will preferentially bind to the iron, right? And then these things are able to suck in aluminium and spit it out. We know that because of what I used to derive the wheel within a wheel within a wheel structure was on what I call the fracture sample, okay, from the John Hutchison collection, okay. That particular sample showed that different scales of EVO would fluidize aluminium and move the aluminium around the outside of its structure, okay. So it's literally like a drill bit, okay. It doesn't get affected by it, but it can move the aluminium around it. Now, if you could imagine a load of these things on the aluminium, you then put the knife on there, and the knife is then, or it just forms after the effect is started. It then starts to bind to the iron. As the iron sinks, as the iron is obviously, it's heavy, but it doesn't plastically deform at this level. But we know the aluminium is preferentially plastically deformed. It starts to sink in. Now, it might be that these things act fast, and they do. They act extremely fast. So it might sink in, boom, until there's some sort of resonant phenomena set up that it gets stuck where it did, or it just so happened that John turned off the power at a particular time. I don't know. So my speculation was effectively a load of micro machines in a boundary layer around that knife allowed it to burrow in at a speed of unknown rate into the aluminium. And then this is what I saw on the analysis, which I did on the 11th of June, 2024. So I'm going to try and share my screen, if I may, now.
Yeah, go ahead. You could press the button at the bottom. And
then... no, which button am I pressing?
It says there should be an arrow, like a box with an arrow up.
Okay, it says this will allow you to take over from Matthew as the main presenter.
Yeah,
share now.
Yeah,
okay,
I'll stop presenting, so you go on.
Yeah, window. Okay, so I can share this, I think. Right, can you see that?
Yeah, it's shown, and I will unpin to make it smaller. Okay, how do I unpin? Whoops. Okay, just leave it. Yeah, so we can see a fractal toroidal moment propulsion to the cosmic summit.
Yeah, so this was the title of my presentation last Saturday, so just over a week ago. And what you're looking there on the background is a new analysis mode that's available in the Phenom scanning electron microscope, where they do a quick and dirty paintbrush over the area that you're looking at. So what's happened is John Hutchison has used a plane tool, or it's basically taking a layer of metal off the aluminium, which is in blue here, and the steel, which is in this yellow. Now, the blue here is aluminium that's smeared onto the steel by the tool bit. Okay. Now, because of this, we can't look everywhere around the knife and aluminium block, because on the top end of this particular area where it's been cut, in this case by a saw, I think, or by this planing process, it's filled in those gaps, but along the side it doesn't do that. So here we have the aluminium and oxygen, and these little blue spots here are actually little magnesium islands. And over here, this is the steel in iron here, and there's some chrome here. You can see this green bit here is chrome. This is the boundary layer, and if you look at the scale down the bottom here, it's approximately 20 microns. That's 50 microns for the whole lot. So it's 10 per little tick. So that's about 20 microns. That's a standard kind of size for an exotic vacuum object. Now, in the middle here, we've got something that's a bit hexagon and another thing that's a bit hexagon. It's kind of pulled away from the aluminium. And in my view, this is a yang and this is a yin. You've got a central point here. And all of the elements which are typically synthesized in this instance are in this 20 micron boundary layer. Okay, and this is where I imagined, and there's another 2 up here, 1, 2 there, and there's 2 here. Maybe this is a pair here. So and this might be one on the flat here. So I would imagine that this whole knife was either covered with these things or it was on the aluminium and it captured them as it sank in. And so this is churning up the material and it's transmuting it and to a degree making it disappear. So if you actually look at Takaaki Matsumoto's book, where he did palladium deuterium electrolysis, some of his early experiments in, I think the first couple of experiments he did in the, well, firstly, I can show you this. These are his yin and yang structures in his experiments. So you can imagine those all around the outside of the steel, like you're seeing in the image above there, right? And actually, you can see the scale down the bottom of that is 50 microns. So each individual one of those is, you know, about 20 microns, and 2 of them is about 40 microns. It's the same scale, right? Same scale as the Hutchison effect. And this was in fusion technology in November 1993. Okay, so so that's that. So Matsumoto replicated that without really realizing it. And so if we go back to his earlier work, he had this palladium rod which he deuterated, and after the experiment he cut it in half, and inside he found these crystals that had been eaten away from the boundary layer. And so they start getting eaten away with the little spherical holes, and then you get more and more of them joining together, and it eventually starts eating the crystal away. And he did a schematic like, so you can see here even bigger areas, spherical holes, and you can see the crystal boundaries there, okay? And ultimately you end up with the whole crystal being eaten away. So the material has disappeared, and around the boundary you get element synthesis, and the elements you get synthesized are the same kind of elements you see here. Okay, so we have structures that are the same size. They're typically in pairs, but not necessarily, because the flux loop might be traveling further, and they are chewing whatever material they were. That was palladium deuterium in that case. In this, it's aluminium on one side predominantly, and steel and a little bit of chrome on the other side. And it's producing these typical elements that you can see down here: calcium, silicon. Obviously, you get oxygen everywhere, and carbon. You can see carbons all through here. Okay, so and also it makes a lot of material disappear. So this might be material that's actually converted into light and leptons, and it just comes away. Okay, so if I go to the next slide here, if it's going to let me do that, I don't know how I can do that. How can I do that?
Yeah. Should be.
I don't.
Press right on your keyboard, maybe, or left.
Doing all of that, but it kind of frozen. I don't know why that's frozen.
Okay, maybe present a different photo. I don't know why.
Well, it's not a photo. It's actually meant to be a presentation.
Okay, yeah, I'm not sure.
Space, return. No, nothing's in that window seems to be frozen. Let me just, I unshare, and well, let me see if I can, I'll unshare and I'll see if I can get it working again. Start presenting. Okay, so I'm going to go, I don't know why that's not, yeah, it's not allowing me to go forward. I don't have a page down on this keyboard. I wonder if it's that. That's just silly.
Yeah, otherwise you could send it to me, email. Then
no, it's okay. What I can do is I can put it into, I've got it in, okay, set up show. I had it in kiosk mode. I'll do full screen individual. This should work.
Hi, my name.
It's just not okay. Yeah, that works. Okay, all right. Weird. Okay, let me just share that again. Be with you. Sorry for the hiatus, everyone that's watching. Okay, so all right, this should work. So in the next slide, you can see what I've done is I've taken a 3D map that actually is able to determine the certain level of height differential here. And I've done a line across this yin-yang pair, and you can see that there's a huge hole in the center of this, and it's a certain width, and there's a huge spike in the yin side, and the yin side has about the same diameter spike here as the hole is over here. So I'm fairly convinced that this is a yin-yang pair, and there will be a flux loop that's going around through this orthogonal to this plane. So if you see this as the plan, the elevation, there will be a cutting field that's going around here that's in the plan. Okay, so that is the structures. Now, if we go to the next slide, this is what I'm talking about, and this is the section that the owner cut off, and I'm looking at this end of it here. Yeah. Okay, or I might be looking at one of these, but anyway. And this is the key thing. In the boundary layer, I found a lot of iron spheres. Okay, and this is the one in the time that I had that showed crenellations. It was big enough, so you can see the whole full scale here is 8 microns, and you can see that this is around about 3.6, 3.7 microns, and at this scale you can start to see some of the individual crenellations, and you can see the smallest distance of the crenellation there. So that's 2 microns. If you say 1 micron, it's just under a micron. So you don't see any crenellations, because normally if they're below about 2 microns, because an individual crenellation needs, you know, the curvature to allow for 0.8 of a micron. Okay, so otherwise they just appear as like a sphere like this. So this is in the boundary layer, and in the full video and in the book I will share, you'll see that there are many along the boundary layer. And these are the crenellated spheres that I believe are formed in this intense magnetic vortex that's produced. Now, if we look at them here, and I've got the spot sensor on here, you can see that this is by atomic concentration. Iron is 31.18% of the atom concentration, and oxygen is nearly 58%. So it's approximately an FeO2 ratio, and this is the classic ratio for this. Where there's a discrepancy is I think it's got some chromium in there, and this would imply that this comes from this steel. So I believe that when this is falling in there, there is some magnetic capture of iron from the steel, and as that is ripped apart and pulled into this structure, it captures some of the chrome as it goes. And there we go. This is literally tearing steel apart, okay, and producing iron-rich crenellated microspheres. And there's no thermite involved whatsoever. No thermite at all. None. There's no thermite here whatsoever. Yeah. And there is no little neutron bomb. And there's absolutely no jet fuel. There's none of those 3 things in this experiment, okay? But there is iron-rich crenellated microspheres that has torn the steel apart.
Yeah, because 9/11 was asking about the iron spheres in the WTC dust.
Oh, they had dust. They had in the dust there, did they?
Yeah,
that's interesting.
They had the spheres in the dust.
Really?
Yeah. Another one is
did they?
The crop circles as well.
Yeah. And crop circles. What are they seen above crop circles?
Yeah, they have a ball light.
There we go. I rest my case.
Yeah, no, definitely. And
I rest my case.
One question I have is, so besides the exotic events that have these microspheres, it's not that, is it that rare to have microspheres, these iron microspheres?
So I believe that any process that has charge separation, so in our water experiments with aluminium foil, Alan Cusk was the first person to try an experiment other than the original ultra experiment that used indium foil, which was a bit of serendipity. I said in 2000 in ICCF 22 in 2019, I said, look, can someone go out there and try another metal? And it took 9 months for someone to have a go, but they did, and it was Alan Cusk, and he came back and there was these 2 spots on these with his microscope. That's all he could see. And I replicated it immediately, and I saw that they were yin-yang shaped structures, and that the rest is history. Very quickly, it was replicated by David Boutelier in Canada, and he found that the cones or the troughs seemed to be ripped away and they appear to be able to be picked up with a magnet, and that's interesting because, well, it's meant to be aluminium. What are these bits and only the cones and troughs? Why are they being picked up by a magnet? And then I thought, I'll replicate this and I'll see if I can see what's in the center of these structures. And when I did the magnet and I moved it around in my experiment, I could see that there was something like a hexagonal thing in the center of this trough, and in the center of that hexagonal structure was a spheroid-like object. And I thought, okay, Alan Goldwater's got a scanning electron microscope. He's got exactly the same ultrasonic tank. So I asked him, like I said, can you go out and can you do this experiment, try and get the thickest aluminium foil you can find and run it? And he ran it for 900 seconds. He ran a magnet around, put it under the SEM, and he found loads of iron-rich crenellated microspheres, right? And of course, later I realized that if you have water is polar. When polar molecules are next to, when water is next to a hydrophilic material like aluminium or indeed any metal, it will change the space charge ratio in the water column. And so that when that is put into a vortex going that way and a vortex in a toroidal motion, this will create the toroidal moment. And then the toroidal moment will reinforce the process. And so it could be iron that's being extracted from the aluminium foil. Okay. There is, in the aluminium that I've looked at, that I've got commercially, there are small flecks of iron. But how does it end up being in this absolutely smooth, glassy-like iron oxide in this incredible FeO2 ratio, which is a new oxidation state of iron? Like, how does that happen, right? And these things stay at FeO2. They don't seem to degrade. They seem to stay in that state. Something very special about them. So water with aluminium and ultrasound, in fact, probably any sound, as long as it produces standing waves. Standing waves, again, is with 180 degrees out of phase. So it's a bit like Tom Bin's phase conjugation that produces scalar waves. It's not surprising that it produces the same effect, in my view. So wherever you get polar or charge-separated material with extreme multi-dimensional multi-axis hydrodynamic shear, you will end up with forming these toroidal moment structures, which are self-reinforcing, self-organizing, and they will lead to the formation of iron-rich crenellated microspheres. And that's it. So anywhere those circumstances could occur. So for instance, when a meteorite is coming through the atmosphere, you get a lot of plasma. Obviously, that is charge separation. You have a vast amount of hydrodynamic shear in many axes, and simultaneously, you have, obviously, in a lot of meteorites, you have a lot of iron present, and therefore you're going to get iron-rich crenellated microspheres. And in fact, that is what a lot of the conference was about. In fact, it's mostly about the Younger Dryas impact theory, where there are, in sediment layers found around the world, in this so-called meteorite, vast numbers of meteorites coming in, there are these iron-rich crenellated spheres or spheroids. It doesn't only produce iron; it also produces silicon dioxide and stuff. So in sphere form. So are they common? I would suggest that every lightning bolt is a ball lightning, as Ken Shoulders. I would agree with Ken Shoulders. The actual leader on the lightning bolt is a ball lightning. And in the center of that, there will be various scales at the fractal subquanta levels of iron-rich crenellated spheres. And there's a guy that goes out famously and he takes a magnet. I think he's in Scandinavia somewhere and goes around drains or in the corners of roads or whatever. And he picks up magnetic particles and then he puts them under the microscope and sorts them. And some of those are iron-rich crenellated microspheres. Now he's calling them all micrometeorites, but some might be caused by terrestrial origins of hydrodynamic shear in a charge-separated environment, and some might be literally meteorites.
Yeah, definitely. I'm actually opening up. I'm sharing this one right now, unless you want to share more stuff. This article here, tiny iron spheres are oldest fossilized space dust. So this is from the first micrometeorites known to land on Earth, and they have the No, yeah, definitely, that's great. And also, so James, with the first super chat. All right, thank you. And yeah, so let's just no, this is great.
So I can actually go how I derive the structure. It's in this presentation if you want to.
Yeah, I actually wanted to show. I was also going to ask how do you derive, and also if you can explain it especially for a lot of the users that haven't quite grasped the yin yang and the
Yeah, sure. I mean, for
right.
your audience, I think it's very important to understand it. So if you put me full screen, I
Yeah, I'm stopping.
share. Okay, great.
You're sharing already. I could just pin
Okay,
it.
so how I came into this was I visited with my older daughter the electricity exhibition, the Amberley Chalk Pits Museum in West Sussex in the UK, on her birthday one time. And as you walked in there was this shield, which was apparently the first crest of the Order of Electrical Engineers, which eventually became the IEEE. If you go to Wikipedia, it shows a later crest. This is the original, not the one that they call is the original, right? Yeah. And what I found interesting is "Out of darkness cometh light." That's a religious reference, of course, but it was this, actual Maltese cross. And of course, "Out of darkness cometh light" is like literally the point of creation. So a Maltese cross and literally the point of creation. So I wanted to know why the people that were very first starting to talk about electricity would choose this symbol. And in my investigations, which to be fair weren't very long, I was just preparing this slide for a presentation I gave in 2017 to the in Italy to the cold nuclear transmutation field, or what they call the condensed matter nuclear science field. I came across this particular stele, which is in the British Museum, and it was this symbol around his neck, which was the closest reference there. And so what I wanted to do was find out what that was. And apparently this is the same as the Maltese cross, but it says it's the symbol of God-controlled power. Okay, so I thought that's interesting. This is the power of God. And it's also the sun disk. It was much later that I found that actually that was on the Nazi flag in the top left-hand corner. Most people think it's just the auspicious symbol, but also the sun disk is also part of the Nazi flag. So, that aside, God-controlled power, the symbol of God-controlled power. And it's from this stele of Shamshi Adad, and it's Assyrian about 814 BC. And on the side, it has cuneiform, which is 1,000 years earlier, which implies that this understanding of whatever this means was from science that was from 1,000 years before that. So we're talking at least 3,800 years ago.
And also,
okay?
just chime in, I actually speak a dialect of Assyrian. So
really?
Yeah, I was actually born in Iraq.
Oh, wonderful! I wanted to go to Iraq because I actually booked to go to Syria actually.
Okay.
And I wanted to see, because I went to India, and then on the way back I wanted to see the other part, the Silk Route. And this was in 2001, and I booked with Syrian Airlines. And I was going to go into Damascus, and I actually planned to go to the Iraq border actually at that time, because maybe I was, a nutter, more than everyone thinks usually. But what happened was, as I turned up to the airport, and I had back then you had to reconfirm your flights, and they give me a number to reconfirm, but I tried to ring it like well in advance, and there was no caller, and I actually went to their offices and there was no one there. And when we turned up, they said, I got to me and it's like, stand aside. I said, what do you mean stand aside? Stand aside. I said, why? She says, we haven't reconfirmed your flight. I said, well, Syrian Airlines gave me this number in London to reconfirm my flight, and I couldn't reconfirm because there was no one answering. And you know what they said? They just laughed at me and said that office has been shut for 4 years. Stand aside. And they just sold my ticket to people that were going via Syria to the heart, right? So, and I was like, no. So I never actually went to Syria, but there we go. And I never went to Iraq, so maybe that was a good thing at that time in 2001.
2001 as well, yeah.
Anyway, so basically, this is the symbol. And my second time that I shared anything with any historical reference was this, which was also a symbol of a sun worshipping cult. And it wasn't until much later that I realized that to have a wheel of anything, you need at least 2 subwheels. So if you consider this as a wheel, it has to have 2 subwheels. So there is a wheel within this wheel, right? And that wheel makes this wheel. So there's a wheel, then a wheel, So a wheel making a wheel, and that wheel makes this wheel, and then those wheels make this wheel. So this is at least a wheel within a wheel within a wheel, but probably a wheel within a wheel within a wheel within a wheel, right? And it has a vector through the center, okay? So this is actually all over rocks in northern Italy from a sun worshipping cult, and apparently it's the way the sun works, according to them, 2,000 years ago plus. And here, 1,600 years ago on Ilkley Moor, a few hundred meters away, I was required by my family to bury my grandmother's ashes. There is exactly the same symbol.
Holy, yeah.
Go figure. Okay. So it took a long time to derive the structure. This is a close-up on the 3D structure, and this is the 2D structure. Like I say, each sub-tour, this is a tour can have only two. A tour needs to be made of a minimum of 2 sub-tours, right? But any tour can be made of many more tours. So in this case, I've got the main level tour, the N level tour, is made of N-1, two N-1s, and 4 N-2s. This is a minimum wheel within a wheel within a wheel structure, okay? But naturally, you could have 4 and 4 of those making the N level tour. So in this case, you've got 4 N-1 level tours, and you've got 16 N-2 level tours to make the structure. Each of them has this torsional beam that comes out. This is exactly and precisely the Sothic ratio. The Sothic ratio is always associated next to the ankh, and the lower part of the ankh is considered by the Egyptians to be the hidden to all the secret to all hidden technology. Okay, and so the ankh loop would come from the Christ center. This is the Maltese cross, but in one plane, and it comes up in this section around here. You take that away, and you have the 2 arms. You've got 2 arms when you've got a 2 level subtours. This is the apple here in green, and it's the sacred geometry. It's the standard magnetohydrodynamic structure or hydrodynamic structure, exactly and precisely. And then this is the non-radiating boundary, which I derived from observing experiments, many physical experiments. I didn't realize that it was called the non-radiating boundary until I realized that this is a fractal toroidal structure called supertoroidal in the Soviet field that discovered it first. And the maths defines from the toroidal structures the position of this non-radiating boundary. Okay. Now, if you only have 2 subtours, the disruption beams interact. This disruption cone, this Sothic triangle cone, it has a point here, this sphere, this little circle here, which interacts with the torus on the fractal level above. So you've got them here, which interact to the fractal level above here, and this one interacts at this point with the fractal level above here. This puts a half twist coming out at this point, and when you only have 2, 3, you have the disruption beam comes all the way out and penetrates through the non-radiating boundary. Now I'll show you basically why. The Chi-Rho, which is this point here, exactly and precisely is the corner of the Great Step in the Great Pyramid of Giza. And Chi-Rho is Chi-Rho. It is Chi is the life force, and Rho is torsional flow with density, as per the Greek symbols. And of course, the Greeks ruled and ran Cairo for quite some time, and Egypt, in fact. This center line of the Grand Gallery here is 7 meters to the east. That is because the structure that needs to do the separation of the hydrogen into etheric matter is facing east, but it's also to the east, but it's facing north, because that is the way it needs to be arranged. It's exactly and precisely arranged in the maximum flux of ether on the average throughout the summer and the winter, with the Earth rotating, and it's positioned correctly. And then the accumulation chamber, the so-called sarcophagus, is into the west, exactly and precisely where we see matter synthesized in our simple experiments, which I'll show you. So it comes about by Bostic's work. Bostic was trying to replicate or trying to convert the hydrogen bomb into domestic fusion. He shot titanium doped with deuterium with a 10,000 amp pulse. It produced a magnetic or a plasma flux loop or a plasma loop, which supposedly magnetically be connected here, producing a poloidal magnetic field, and your current is going around in here. And it's like a self-enclosed Z-pinch, okay? And he's firing these from at least 2 guns, necessarily at least 2 guns, from opposite side of the chamber. So they'll have a spin one way and a spin the other way, exactly as is produced in our systems. And here is 8, and they're coming over a magnetic field. And this is a torus of tori. This is already a torus of tori. And at this point, it actually produces what's called a toroidal moment, which was not discovered until 1965 by Vladimirovich Dubovik, who died nearly 2 months ago, and was published in his thesis from the nuclear research facility of Dubna in 1967. So this is Tom Bearden talking about this. You can go and look at the presentation. This is Ken Shoulder's conclusion to his 1987 book, 5 years after investigating John Hutchison, EVO Taylor discovery. He's saying they are magnetic monopoles that have no emission of electro and magnetic fields here, but they project the scalar and vector potentials, same as we've got here in 2016 in Nature Materials, nearly 30 years apart and still not really understanding what was discovered. Okay, so here's the Jeremy Rees image I was talking about earlier, and it's a slice through a kind of normal smoke soliton. This doesn't have charge separated particles in it. So this just shows the flow pattern, but it doesn't show the effect of toroidal moment. However, when you get it in water, like here in these images from that I took in 2017 by I took, but of Suhas Ralkar's ultrasonic tank, you will see that this kind of structure here, which is this is caused by the hydrodynamic structure, but what's happening is here is that everywhere you see bubble, it's lower pressure. So how can there be lower pressure everywhere here? Well, there must be something that's crushing material in the center of these 2 vortices. Somehow it's being depressurized everywhere around here. This is also depressurized here. So when you look at it here on the next slide, here we have a depressurization of tungsten. This is in the Hutchison effect with a black hole here. This is in a Neil Crichton gold. This is the torsional flow. This is in a Shishkin experiment, okay, from cavitation. This is HHO on tungsten. And as I said, where the torus that this produces on the fractal level above intersects, you get a disruption beam. And this is the point of disruption between this torus and the fractal torus above, with the cone starting in the Christ center here and coming out like that. But part of the cone is outside of the torus above and part of it's inside. And the bit that's inside causes this flow here of, this is carbon. It's almost like a diamond film in this point here. And this is strontium. So the material is disassembled here from the tungsten. It's brought into here and it's resynthesized into ordinary elements that are typical in life. So that's the bubble structure you just saw. That's the one you saw on tungsten. These both are aluminium foil in an ultra experiment. You can see the torsion wave here. You can see the way it comes in here, and it comes into this one and it feeds into this one. This is the omega and this is the alpha. I am the alpha and the omega. This is the omega and the symbol, and the way this twists down here with the curve and the carbon on one side with the spot, that is your Om symbol from the Sanskrit. This is the caduceus, and this is a ball lightning that hit the fused quartz of Urian, and you can see the double spiral here from the caduceus. You can see it goes in the top here and comes down the bottom here. It goes in the top here, comes down the bottom here. This is in plasma, this is in water. And this is what I was talking about. You have areas with event horizon. So one event horizon is here. You can see this material here, which I think is quartz, is not at all affected here at all. But inside this circle here, it's 100% swept. 100% swept. Okay, so not affected at all outside that point, 100% affected inside. Now, the main materials are synthesized inside the golden ratio line and inside the Vesica Pisces. I mean exactly the Vesica Pisces, the fish bladder, the first symbol of the Christian church. Chiro is this bit here and this bit here, and the flow through the center with torsion, as I showed you on the copper oxide sample before. And in this instance, this is Christ center, okay? On this side, it has some boron crystals here at the head of the Magatama, okay? This has no calcium here, okay? Over this side, in this point here, which is exactly and precisely where the sarcophagus is in the Great Pyramid of Egypt, this has calcium, and there is no boron. Aluminium is the background here. You take oxygen away from aluminium and you get boron, and you take the oxygen around to here, you add oxygen to aluminium, and you get some of the isotopes of calcium. Now, this is a pit, and this is a cone. The cone would be 7 meters to the west, and the pit and this bit here would be to the east. Sorry, this is to the east rather, 7 meters to the east, and this is the pit. This is the cone, 7 meters to the east. This is the pit, which would be to the west. This is the sarcophagus. So whatever was being disassembled, which I believe was hydrogen into etheric matter and protons and electrons, the etheric matter would travel through the non-spin material, which is calcium carbonate, except for calcium 43, which is a small fraction, rare isotope of calcium. So almost no matter is interacted with by the wormhole. When it is reborn over here into what I would say was the food of the gods, the manna, it would appear probably as a white powder. The reason is because of that calcium 43, because it does get moved a little bit along with the etheric matter. Okay, so that is that. But here you can see the perfect yin yang of the structure. This is the Sothic triangle, and the Sothic triangle, as I said, is always associated with Yank, and the Yank is the distance between here and the long bar down here, which eventually became the Christian cross with the bit up straight up there. Okay, so this is how I derived this structure here. This is 1 quanta, but it's too small on my microscope to see. The next quanta up is that rotated 90 degrees in here. This is an outie, this is an innie. One of those is a yin, one of those is a yang. Okay, if you take that and you rotate that 90 degrees, you get here. And so these are the same scale. Okay, they're 200 micron, 200 micron, 200 micron, 200 micron. All of these are the same scales. You can literally do it in your head. It doesn't matter whether you've got one made of all yins or you've got ones made of all yangs, but it doesn't matter. This structure is the same as this structure. It's actually, but I'm imaging this from the side. So you can see the aluminium that's swept through, making like an apple core in the center here. Now you take this structure and you rotate that 90 degrees and put it around here, you get this one, which is, this is a wheel within a wheel within a wheel within a wheel. Okay, but you only need a wheel within a wheel within a wheel, and then it's self-similar. This has divisions here, which are, there's 48 of them if you count the number here and the number of divisions that you can see for the number of the radius that is presented. Okay, so that is how I derive this structure, a wheel within a wheel within a wheel, and it's self-similar where this wheel is equivalent to the full structure here. And by the fact that this can move things around it, quantized to its subfractal levels, you can end up by forming the zeta-B gang motion of the photon that creates the electron, and so on up to the other parts of the fractions of the atoms. So that's how I came up with the basic structure. And when I said this, I said that this is the structure of all the physical universe. So when you get, for instance, a tornado producing a water spout on the ocean, what you're seeing is the interaction of the fractal toroidal moment electrodynamic structure up in the sky and its toroidal beam interacting with a torus in the physical vacuum at the next quanta level up. And so that's why you see that spiraling. You're actually looking at the effect of that toroidal beam on the ocean. And where that focus hits, you'll see it in the coming slide. I don't believe that it is causing that matter to that water to boil, and I don't think it's literally lifting it all as water vapor. I think it's literally causing the water polar bonds to be weakened so that the water comes apart without being boiled. You'll see it in a sec here. So when I came up with this structure, I immediately recognized, this was on the 17th of February 2020, I immediately recognized what I'd shared in that earlier presentation back in 2017, It was that stele again. And at the top of the stele, it had this structure. And this is 23 divisions. And if I made that 180 degrees, it would be 24. And so you do a full rotation, that's 48. So I thought, this has got to be more than coincidence. So I went to the British Museum's website, and at the time when I asked this question on there, it's slightly changed since, by the way. It said, this is the flying disc of the sky gods. That's what it said, right? And so later in the Henk Uren experiment I was studying, this was the what I call the Vega Valley, we found these blown up parts of ball lightning, and this is a 2-order structure, I think, with 15 subdivisions. This is a 6-order truncated hexagon with 32 divisions. That's the same number as you've got in the center here, 32 divisions here. This would be 48 if it was 4 quarters rather than just this here with 6 subdivisions here. This is a large structure, but it only has 3 divisions here. So you can literally see different variations of the different subfractal structures here. And I think what happens is when it reaches 48 on any subdivision, it then snaps and reorganizes, or it blows up. So it'll either reorganize to the next fractal structure with only 2 of, say, 24, and then it builds from there, or it might reorganize completely where it only has 6 on a substructure, which is kind of what I'm discussing, is a stable structure. Now here, everything in these structures is calcium oxide, which is almost all of what the pyramid is made from, you know. Here, this is carbon and copper. These are diamagnetic. Calcium, oxygen, and calcium oxide are all paramagnetic. They can live inside the magnetic structure, okay? So I shared this, and this with the Russian community, and they sent me back this result of the Soviet energetics research from the Cold War period. And it's a current loop producing a magnetic field. Rotate this 90 degrees, you have 6 of them around there, produces in their idea electric field. This is actually how I described this during my video long before I was ever sent this. And then you take this and you rotate it 90 degrees, and you've got these electric fields going around it, another magnetic field. This is a wheel within a wheel within a wheel. Exactly the same thing. And this is the basics of the Soviet energetics main program. Okay. This is the inventor who died on April 20, or rather the discoverer of the toroidal moment, Vladimirovich Dubovik. And this is him discussing in the room that I presented in February 2015 in the Friendship University in Moscow. And he's describing how these structures can suck the life force out of you, the chi out of you. And he's trying to warn the people, because what happened here in this in January is that I think this is in January in 2018, and so it's a couple of weeks later. The leader of the cold nuclear transmutation and ball lightning monthly meetings and semi-annual conferences had died. He was doing electric discharge on water experiments, and he's trying to warn everyone that when you play around with this technology, it can suck chi out of you and it can kill you. This is the guy that invented it, or rather discovered it, right? So it can literally destabilize matter. And here is an example in the 1980s work of the Shakharov generator. This is a yin, it's not so bright. You fuse 2 deuterons together, you get 25 million electron volts. If you have a yang, which disassembles matter, if you take 1 baryon, a proton or a neutron, and disassemble it, you're getting like 930 or whatever million electron volts. So this is 133 times more energy than fusion. Okay, so the yang is always brighter. The yang is the sun, the moon is the yin. The yin doesn't glow as bright as the yang because the yin is the moon, it's reflecting the energy. This is the yang, it's producing the energy. It's producing the energy by disassembling matter. Okay, now in the case of the yin, its disruption beam is producing a 0 albedo UFO. You can create UFOs, in my view, this way, and these would be the 0 albedo type. And this is extracting, this is called single bar thermal extraction. It's extracting all of the energy of the matter at this point in space and time, and it's pulling it in. And a female force always has to take energy from its environment to create new life, to assemble new life. Fusion is assembling matter. It's condensing matter. This is the female force, okay? The male force goes out into the environment, it gets raw materials, smashes them up, and then hands them over. And this is the luminous. This is the fake UFOs that you can see, which are glowy balls flying around in the sky. And this can be used as a weapon. This can be used as a weapon. This shuts down your electronics, stops people's hearts. This makes metal melt, and this gives people brain cancer. So many horrendous weapons are being developed from this technology. I'm absolutely certain of that. But you're seeing the yin and the yang force here. Okay. So what is going on? Well, in this structure here, you have a Mobius strip with copper on the outside. And because you're on a Mobius strip, you turn it over and connect it. You effectively only have one terminal. You treat it with RF, and then you hit it with a high current pulse of what do you call it? Of mains voltage. And depending on how you configured it, you get one or the other effect going on. And this is a Mobius strip, and this is something with a phase singularity. Phase singularity is basically like this Penrose staircase. You move round in one direction, you don't go up, and you move round in the other direction, and you don't go down, but you're still going round and round, right? So whichever way you go round this, you're changing your phase angle, and it's getting bigger and bigger, or lower and lower and lower, but you're not going up or down, okay? In this case, what you're seeing here is the phase diagram of a single 180-degree phase change on a vortex soliton. So that's what happens on a vortex soliton, which is your ring soliton, which we saw earlier. And this will happen on every fractal subtorque, okay? And anyway, there we go. So the toroidal moment is electric current going around produces a magnetic loop. Rotate that 90 degrees, and you get more than two, and you end up producing a toroidal moment, and then it becomes orders of toroidal moment, okay? And that is it. And it was extension of Yakov Zeldovich's anapole from 1957. And I call it the fractal toroidal moment because basically fractal is more explanational than super or hyper. Essentially, it's self-similar, and super or hyper just doesn't tell you that it's self-similar. Fractal does. And so this is the basic structure. This is from Science in 2011. And if you have an oxygen atom here, copper, 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 this is a current loop. This is a counter current loop. This is the toroidal moment. This is in Science in 2011. And this is their theory, and this is it in practice in Lion reactor. This is copper oxide. This is copper oxide theorized. This is copper oxide. Okay. So, and that's that one there is a yang because it's made a hole. Like, and this is a yang. This is made a hole. You see these birdie wings, exactly the same in Hutchison effect too in the sample. Oh, and by the way, the Hutchison effect was in aluminium. That one that you just saw when it loops around, when it comes round. Yeah, that it comes in around in a minute. Anyway, it was there. It was in aluminium. So we've got it in aluminium and copper. So the ball. How are we doing? Are you okay with this? Do people know the explanation?
Yeah, I'm just trying to wrap my head around all that. One guy says it reminds this wheel in a wheel reminds of the Ezekiel's wheel from the Bible.
Yes, so we are in Revelations at the moment. We are going through the tribulations, and my remote viewing saying that unless we get our shit together, the cataclysm will come between 2012 and 2032 and 2034. But I believe because we have rediscovered this, what I call the God's toolbox. We didn't steal it. We didn't take it as fallen angels. We're not pretending we're gods with it. Whatever it is, we can head it off if we understand how to use it properly, in my view. So, I think we're on the... I saw a video yesterday, actually, about the Hopi belief. And I think we've gone through 4 cycles on Earth, and basically because we abuse the Earth as a living organism wipes us clean. But they do say that in the 5th cycle, that there will come a white man from the East and tell the Hopi people and explain their ancient symbols, and that we will be able to recognize how to work with nature. We will be able to be Homo symbiont. We will be able to, that which I registered in 2009, by the way. Or 2007, we will be symbiotic. We'll be symbiotic man with the planet. We have to be. When we understand the God's toolbox, we can make all the elements. We don't need, and we can make all the energy. We do not need to destroy the planet. We don't need to suck up groundwater. We can make unlimited water from the sea, you know, with desalination. So we can stop the destructive cycle, and we can live in harmony with the planet, work in the same way that the planet works. So we are in Revelations, and it's not surprising. So you'll see a lot more. You've got the pestilence. They've delivered the pestilence. It didn't quite deliver, so they'll probably try and hit us with that again. As I said, I predicted that before they did it. And I'm, you know, it's there on my Steemit in the blockchain. I'm not making it up. It's there.
Yeah, you did say that. That's pretty.
Yeah. I'm not. Then I said after that there would be the war, and I've got recordings of one of the next things they'll do. They'll try and put a chip in everyone's brain. But I want to head that off at the pass, because they don't really need to do that. They can use this technology directly. So this is meant to be older than most of the other structures in Egypt, and it's meant to be supposedly laser cut onto the Temple of Osiris in Abydos. This particular sphere is a copy of Indian temple dragon dogs, and I had my hand on this 34 years ago when I was in Beijing, before they had cars in Beijing. And this is on the right paw of the right hand temple dragon in the central temple in the Forbidden Palace in Beijing. And I was very fortunate to be able to connect with this all those years ago as part of my personal journey. So this is a 3D structure of the flower of life, and this is a model of ball lightning and how the substructures connect together. It would also be a model of how something would connect and mesh together over that knife of John Hutchison in order for it to melt its way into the aluminium. Now, in this experiment by Henk Uren, we have some standard copper pipes, plumbing pipes, 3 of them, on a mild steel plate with another mild steel plate above, and there is actually a piece of zinc to get the process going underneath here. But what you see on the video is hemispheres of ball, these plasmoid structures, these spheres on there. And in one particular part of the video, it's, you know, you see a sphere there, and when the sphere's gone, there's a spherical hole cut out of one of the most thermally conductive materials that are copper, a bit like Terminator appears in the mesh link fence in that film. Exactly and precisely. Everything within that material is disappeared, and it grows, and it gets to a particular boundary, and everything that's in that boundary is complete. Every metallic thing is consumed. But what I find in these systems is the stuff that's very interesting occurs on the boundary, because self-similar structures are attracted to these structures, and they like to attach themselves to the boundaries. So on the boundary here, we see a 2-order structure with a vortex. We see a 3-order structure with a vortex. We see a 4-order structure with not really a vortex. The first time you have a 4 structure, you don't really get a tornado vortex, okay? You'll see what I mean in a minute. When you got 5, it starts to be round. I mean, this is a freaking square hole, and this is a triangular hole. Like, think of something spinning around producing a triangle hole. Think of something spinning around that produces a square hole. It doesn't. That's not what's happening, right? It's substructures that are doing it. And you can see there's a substructure here pulling material in here, substructure here pulling material in here, substructure here pulling material in here, and a substructure here kind of pulling a material here, okay? The same thing will be happening here and here. You can see the substructure places here. You can see there's a substructure here pulling material in here, so on and so on and so on around here. But it starts to become a circle. When you have 6, it becomes like a hexagon. You can very clearly see the hexagon imprint here. When it comes 8, you start to see substructures forming in the middle. So 6 is really the break point. Now, why? You're going to see why. With a 2-order structure, like this bubble structure here, you've got the hydrodynamic, magnetohydrodynamic structure is here and here. It's able to pull material in from this one over here, depressurizing this into this, right? So there's a pressure point here. The most depressurized part is just before the phase singularity, where it kind of disappears, the bubbles, because they're repressurized. It's sucking in here, so it's depressurizing. But it has a beam that comes out here, and it has a beam that comes out here. These are these beams here. This is on Neil Crichton Gold, sadly departed Neil Crichton Gold. You've still got the 2 spots in the center, 2 spots in the center. When you ratio these up, it's exactly in the same place. And you have the beam coming out here, beam coming out here. These are the beams that are coming out of the non-radiating boundary here. Yeah, there are these beams here coming from the center point here. Okay. Now, the same thing here. Now, you always have, when you have a two structure, you have this Paisley symbol, the first symbol of the symbol of the first monotheistic religion. Okay, the Paisley symbol of power and like creation and stuff. The same thing is going on here with the vortex. And like I said, this is where the toroid on the fractal level above is interacting with the ocean. Can you imagine how big that ether toroid is? Mm-hmm. Right, so there's a toroidal structure up here, but the vector is, so it's like this is your tornado up in the sky here. If we just look at this one, but this is the tornado. This is the point here, there, that point. If I wrote, or this point rather, this point here is this point here. Mm-hmm. You understand? And there's a big freaking tornado in the ether that's interacting with this surface of the water here. I'm going to do a whole O day on this so that people can understand it implicitly. And that's why the spiral comes in like here. This is ether stream. And the ether stream is affecting the electrons on this boundary layer, right? So that this air and water can travel at extremely fast speeds, but it has zero friction between the immediately adjacent normal air and water. So here are smoke flares. The smoke flares are moving away in a different direction to you imagine the airflow here, which is high speed. So there is not a slowly decaying airspeed here. There is wind moving this way, and then there is wind moving this way, and this is moving faster than this wind. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But zero friction here because the electrons are differently behaving. Okay, to me, this is one of the most important findings of this structure, is that where it interacts with here, there is a unbelievably massive donut, and you're looking at the flow pattern of the ether in that, going around that donut and coming into here. Now, this is the center. It's the center of this structure, effectively. It's the beam. And what's happening here is this is the disruption beam that Podkletnov saw, that I showed you on the HHO, right? And it's because it's affecting the polar bonds here, the water is just falling apart. Now, normally when you boil water, the polar bonds are shaking so hard that they come off, right? And then the water is water gas, right? But it's at 100 and whatever degrees centigrade. What happens here is the electrons don't need to be shaken thermally. They just fall apart. It becomes water gas. It's cold water gas, right? And it then drifts with the overall flux of ether up into the cloud. Okay? Mm-hmm. All right.
No, amazing.
So here's a three-order structure. And again, the three-order structure allows for the beams to come out. So here it is. This is like a spiral galaxy. So you get 2-arm and 3-arm spiral galaxies. You basically don't get 4-arm spiral galaxies, and you're going to see why in a minute. And then it becomes ring galaxies. Okay. Here is on a steel plate from Roy Shinamaza in his vibrator plate. You have 2 triangular holes.
Wow.
That's just freaking insane, right? 4 burrowed into steel, and in the corner of each one you have a sphere. I'm pretty sure that if that was big enough, those would be iron-rich crenellated spheres, because they are the substructures of a 3-order structure that's making the first N level. Again, here's the 3-order structure from Hanks. Now, what happens when you get to 4? This is a 4-point on Crichton Gold sample. This is a 4-point that I showed you earlier on the Hank Vega sample. Here, what happens is this torsional beam interacts with the non-radiating boundary of the one in the loop around from it. Okay, so at this point, it's the first time that it starts to interact. So the subtor above, it's not radiating, so it basically doesn't escape. It gets pulled into the next one around field. Okay, that's the first time that happens. So the swastika is the first time that the God-controlled power. So God's power is under control.
Wow.
Right? Yeah. The swastika salvistica symbolizes lightning bolts, all lightning. These 2 yellow words are not in the Wikipedia. Everything else is direct from Wikipedia. Representing the thunder god and king of gods, such as Indra in Vedic Hinduism, Zeus in ancient Greek religion, Jupiter in ancient Roman religion, and Thor in the ancient Germanic religion. Wow. Okay, and Slavic. Okay. When you get to 5, it's perfectly and completely inside the non-radiating boundary of the one round. So here on Bendel's inside of his outside of his thunderstorm generator, you get a 5-order structure. This is a 5-order structure on the Henk Vega. This is a 5-order structure with substructures on the nail Crichton gold. When you get 6, look at this. When you get 6, the disruption beam is inside the apple. Okay, so this is perfectly stable. And this is what was in that Soviet energetics research, 6. And here is the substructure. You can see here that the disruption part is purely inside the apple. So 6 is the flower of life. And it literally is. When the spheres intersect, you get the flower of life pattern. Absolutely and precisely. Communication, Hal Puthoff talking about it. This is Hal Puthoff's toroidal moment telecommunications that uses scalar and vector potential, not electromagnetic waves, from 1993, right? This is a discussion between him and Eric Weinstein on how you get around the limits of relativity to go faster than light in a propulsion system. And he says that so there are all kinds of toroidal geometries, for example, where you have no electromagnetic fields whatsoever, but you have strong vector and scalar fields. He's saying this after I have published my findings, right? But he knows fucking exactly, excuse my French, what he's talking about.
Yeah.
But he hasn't been allowed to say it until 2022.
Interesting. So what do you mean by that? Why he's not allowed to say it?
Well, he's been said in the past. There's one simple technology that accounts for all of the special things.
Mm-hmm.
Everything.
Yeah, and what do you think was preventing him from saying until now?
Well, Russell Targ said last year in an interview, says this has never been said before, but I'm telling you because I know he's U.S. naval intelligence.
Wow. Yeah, so he definitely was in the know then for a long time.
I feel sorry for him because he's probably signed things that prevent him from talking, but I've signed nothing.
Mm-hmm. Well,
I'm not prevented from talking about anything, specifically not things that I see in nature that absolutely cannot be patented.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Here in June the 15th, 2023, you have a magnetic vortex and an anti-vortex. This is in a human brain that is doing cognitive tasks while conscious.
Wow.
A magnetic vortex and an anti-vortex produces a toroidal moment. This is how we encode our information into the Akashic record and how we retrieve ESP.
Wow.
ESP is how you control these structures, which you're going to see are a means to propulsion. Hal Puthoff handed over his psychic spy program in the year before he submitted this patent. You're telling me he didn't know that the way the brain communicates with the universe and consciousness wasn't based on this same principle?
Yeah, and this is 2023, and this is
I don't think he's that stupid. I don't think Hal Puthoff is that stupid. Certainly, I don't think that collectively all of the people he knows are stupid enough to just randomly guess to make thing that can only be picked up with a quantum detector, right? And it uses scalar and vector potentials. Okay. So, as I said, Aharonov-Bohm effect is the only thing that allows us to break the laws of relativity to go faster than light and all the other gubbins. This is 1992 or 1993. The mathematics is done in the Joint Institute of Nuclear Research, Dubna, in a paper called Some Remarkable Charge Current Configurations, and it's written by Afanasyev and Dubovik, Vladimirovich Dubovik. And this is figure 13 from that paper, and it says the magnetic time-dependent Aharonov-Bohm effect for charge current configuration discussed in the text, this text here. The time-dependent magnetic flux differs from zero only inside the impenetrable torus T. Outside T, the independent of time electric strength E differs from zero only inside the torus hole. It's a time, anyway. Basically, in this point here, you get the Aharonov-Bohm effect, and in the subtorus, you also get the Aharonov-Bohm effect. So you can create coherent matter at any temperature, as is said in the Lockheed Martin 2013 patent awarded to them, called Systems and Methods for Generating Coherent Matter Waves, using the Aharonov-Bohm effect to create matter wave phase synchronization at any temperature of even fermions.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah, no.
So this is 1979 field resonance propulsion concept. It's from the NASA's website. In this particular paper or proposal, it's basically for an intergalactic space drive in 1979. It lists everything that's been said in Congress as being a revelation about UFOs. And it's based on UFO technology. It literally says it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
On the properties. It lists literally every property you've had so-called disclosed in this paper on NASA's website.
Wow.
It's just hilarious. And look what you have. You have a current loop, 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 right? This is exactly and precisely 6 current loops around a torus. This is a torus of tori, exactly what was being produced by Winston Bostick, but in plasma. Look, these are the magnetic flux loop reconnection lines. And what do? They produce a vortex in the center at the phase singularity. That is exactly the same as this image. This is just from a plan view. This is a perspective view from the Russian, the Soviet energetics work. This paper here, 1979, discusses laser work done in Japan in 1976, where they put a very short pulsed laser into a nonlinear plasma, and they produced structures with over 1,000 Tesla magnetic field. This was weirdly replicated, funded by the US Department of Energy, the UK Department of Energy, European Union, China, South Korea, and Japan, and done on supercomputers and conducted in China. And they fired a laser into a nonlinear plasma, and it produced fields of 1,300 Tesla, which you can see marked in red. You have a ring here, and here you have also 1.3 thousand Tesla, and it stops dead at the phase singularity.
Mm-hmm.
So that's 3,000 Tesla, but they're only marking 3,000 Tesla. What the hell is at that point where all of that magnetic energy is focused?
And this was a supercomputer, the 2021, and then the
supercomputer replication of the 1976 finding, which was key for this intergalactic drive.
Yeah, this is some remarkable stuff.
And here you have, look, this is minus 1.6 trillion volts per meter, and this is plus 1.6 trillion volts per meter. So on the head of this, you have a vortex here. There's the vortex,
mm-hmm.
and that's 3.2 trillion volts per meter.
Wow.
Right? And that's what you're seeing a kind of reflection of going on in that tornado, lifting that water up into the sky. Mm-hmm. It's at the center of this structure. There is such an incredible set of forces going on that they rip the space-time. They rip the ether. They tear a hole in it. So, and that's John Wheeler talking about it. This is a monopole published in 2015. If you have, so this is a paper in Physical Review B from the American Physical Society, and it's an axial hypertoroidal moment. Hypertoroidal is what they call them in the West. So if you want to look up Western research, it's hypertoroidal. In Russia, they call it supertoroidal. Anything I produce is going to be fractal toroidal. Mm-hmm. But what they're saying is that if you have, this is megavolts per millimeter, if you have the field going in one direction, you have a magnetic field structure from this supercomputer simulation going around one way. If you flip the field, it goes into a bistable state that has the magnetic field structure going around the other way. Now, I'm going to show you what we found in thousands of cases, but this is one of the nicest ones, in the heat-producing reactor core. When I analyzed it here earlier this year in March, I think it was, from the heat reactor, cavitation-based heat reactor, Binzhen Huang, and I wrote a paper that's published in Nature Scientific Reports with him, and it was published, and it produces a range of COPs. I think this one produced, I don't know, something like 1.4, maybe up to 4.6 COP. But here is the structure. We found many of these, but here's a good example. This is a vortex with a yin-yang in it, and this is an anti-vortex with the yang-yin in it.
Yeah, that's amazing.
That is exactly what is claimed to produce from a magnetic field, sorry, an electric field one way, an electric field the other way, right? So essentially, you've got a current loop that's going around here somehow, incredibly vast, and it's flipping the structure one way and flipping the structure the other way.
Yeah.
And when you
to-
do the maths, this is enough to split water.
Yeah, that's amazing. I was gonna say, I saw a photo. I don't know if it was this exact one, but like a giant printout that you were holding.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I saw that. I think it was on your Facebook or whatnot.
yeah. So I think this is something like 7.2 volts. I think you need 2.4 or whatever to split water, and then I think it's 4.2 electron volts to split H2. So this can actually create protons and electrons from water.
Wow. I'm just gonna lower my my table. I've been standing the whole time.
Oh, it's good for you.
Yeah, I do that. Use it just to no, it's just so I don't go forever.
Yeah.
'Cause
So basically, you're able to do a phase change in matter, and you're able to extract the hidden energy within matter, which Shishkin, Karoz, and Dubovik, before he died, said is a cluster, a toroidal cluster of condensed relic neutrinos. And this is the so-called etheric matter or Tesla. And that's why he needed to use light elements like beryllium, magnesium, and aluminium. If you go heavier than that, you've got dirty etheric matter rays. So you're able to extract etheric matter, and that is the hidden energy within matter. This is a paper or a unclassified document that was previously classified in the CIA archives. They basically released a whole tranche of documents in 2017. And I did a search for low energy nuclear reactions, and within days I saw this paper and I published it on the MFMP's Facebook, and then I later did a reconstruction of it because some of the text is not clear on my Steemit. That's the Steemit at MFMP, not at Homo Symbiont. But this is from 16th of June 1992, and in this they describe a flight to Alpha Centaurus, and they said that this is the same process as cold fusion. Okay. They're extracting the hidden energy within matter, and they use that to directly generate electricity, and this enables them to close the loop, yielding effectively a COP approaching infinity until all the fuel is in a new phase. Okay, and they say that it also enables propulsion. So the device that enables you to extract the energy from matter also enables propulsion. And they say that 1 kilo of iron and the propulsion device that comes from the device that the process that extracts the energy from that 1 kilo of iron can get you to Alpha Centaurus in 6 years. It's 4.7 light years away. And you've got to accelerate, therefore, to an average of 0.8 of the speed of light and decelerate. And that'll get you there in 6 years. That's the nearest solar system with planets.
Yeah, that's just mind-boggling.
And they said that in 1992. And I'm pretty sure that, because basically in 1992 the Soviet Union was collapsing, so everyone was saying whatever they felt like and trying to get, because all their funding was being removed, because they had like 50 Manhattan projects and we had one, at least, that's admitted to.
And that's again, that's 1992, and fast forward to now, the science says 2 masks is better than 1. That's what they're saying. Fast forward now, they're telling you
bonkers. No, 2 surgical masks where when you breathe, it immediately shoots the virus out to the person sitting next to you, and they suck it in through the side of their mask.
Yeah,
so totally bonkers. Yes. So these things produce a gravitational wave in front of them, in my view. So if you see here, if I go wait for the frame before, it's going around here, and it's beam out there, and then the one that's over here is moving around it before it's even got to it. So look, you see it's moving around its forward path. So these things project something out in front of them. And I believe that's a gravitational wave, and that's pulling dark matter into the structure. Here is our my proposal for an direct energy production reactor using this technology. On the left, this glowing spot here is where the tornado beam touches the inside of this, outside of this part of the reactor, so you can actually physically see it. So this is a reactor made by Henk Uren, and I asked him to put a copper oxide tube in here, copper tube rather, to produce copper oxide, because copper oxide produces the photoelectric effect. So as the electrons are condensing, they will emit up to 2 keV photons, which will cause this negatively biased cathode tube to emit more electrons that then feed into the process. So it's self-multiplying. And then there is actually a ball of light on the end of this tube here, but you can't see it because the iPhone is looking through that ball with it by changing its exposure. And you can see the toroidal structure that's there below. So if I click on this, you'll see. Now, every time you see it flashing, that's when this torus has got a little bit unstable and it's deconnected from its umbilical, which is causing this orange glow, which immediately is unorange when the tornado is not touching down on that part of the sphere. Okay. So when we go to the next image, this is where those flashing off toruses are colliding with the fused quartz, which melts at 1,700 degrees C. And you can see a hexagon impact here. You can see a 4.1 here, means that you're only seeing 3 of the 4. You can see a multi-point one here. So you can see, depending on the level that they've self-organized to, you get different impact marks. Okay. And here, if I click this, this is the anode sheath itself. It's covered with carbon. The reason it's covered with carbon is because, and copper oxide, is because it produces a lot of carbon, this process. Like most of the interstellar dust is carbon. And I believe it's because of this process going on. And when he zooms in, you'll see that the actual mark that he finds here, firstly, it has a fairly hard boundary. So it'll freeze at the end. It has a hard boundary, and then it has a fuzzy bit around the outside. The fuzzy bit is the other ones trying to join the structure, and then the hard boundary is the non-radiating boundary, and then it has a torus in the middle and the overall structure in the middle. So that is a classic one, and I think it's a coppery color because it's literally a lump of copper that's been splattered there, that was carried, and it came back. So what does this look like? Well, it looks like the last research published from Bostic's research. These spoke structures, which are D4D, the same as our structures, and these lumpy structures that are in ring form here. Same thing produced by his work. These are the same things. Yeah. I'll go quickly through this. This is the O-Day, a little bit of crazy. It's another video I produced to explain the Maltese cross space, specifically the Sator Rotas square. This has been a mystery for nearly 2,000 years, just short of 2,000 years. I'm going to do another talk on who I believe actually made this, and that's almost as interesting as decoding this. But to cut a long story short, this is ball lightning. This is again on the Henk Uren Vega sample. There's the iron-rich crenellated sphere. That's silicon dioxide. This is calcium oxide. If you look at the only recorded spectrum of ball lightning published in Physics Review, peer-reviewed, and on Wikipedia, you can see that other than the nitrogen and oxygen, which are in the air, you have calcium, silicon, iron. Those are the predominant lines that you see, as is in this blown-up ball lightning here. Now, these lesser materials here are carbon, oxygen, magnesium, and so forth, okay? But the key elements that are produced are these elements, okay? And if you take iron, silicon, calcium, and oxygen, you basically have almost all of the mass of the Earth.
Wow. I have a question about that ball lightning. So that was actually a mainstream article or paper. How did they?
Which one?
What do you mean?
This one.
Ball
Yeah.
lightning. How do they capture this? Is it?
So it was in China, I think around somewhere between 2010, 2012. You can go and see the links on Wikipedia. Yeah. But they were actually studying the spectrum of lightning, and a ball lightning came into shot, wow. And they did the spectrum of it over a period of time. Wow, and this amazing. Is the spectrum they saw. Yeah. Here is another ball lightning. You can clearly see the caduceus. I've done a video on how everything precisely lines up the sacred geometry. There is this cup here at the head of the caduceus, and that cup is exactly the ratio of this iron-rich crenellated sphere, which has come out here and down here. And there's the ejection jet from its pole. This pole would be inside here, where the hole comes into the center of it. Okay, there is a substructure here, and there's another substructure exactly the same size that's kind of like a moon orbiting around this Earth structure here. Mm-hmm. And this structure and this structure are exactly the core of the substructures gyro on the golden ratio line here. Okay, exactly and precisely. Now this is the ball lightning structure. And this is the flying disk of the sky gods on another Assyrian stele, but this is in elevation. The other one was in plan. This is the elevation of a ball lightning structure blown up. The rings are in plan. This to me shows, and they've even got the circle bit in the center where everything comes into. It's so unbelievably precise. And the fact that they call this the flying disc of the sky god, and it just looks like a bird, but it's not a bird, it's the way these structures are. They are literally the Ankh. Okay. Right. So how do I relate this and that? These two, I said, both sun disk symbols. They're both from religions that believe that this was the way that the sun works, but also the power of the gods, God's controlled power. I've already shown how this is exactly and precisely the 4-4 structure is God's controlled power, under control. It has to be this and only this. 3 is not under control. It's a little bit squiffy. 2 is even more squiffy, right? You can still do a lot of damage with it, or a lot of good or bad, but 4 is very focused. 6 is the best. There you go. This is the D4D ratio observed by Winston Bostick, which is also the top of the Wardenclyffe Tower from Tesla, to put things into context. Okay. And when you have 4, which is the swastika, the non-radiating boundaries exactly and precisely define the Maltese cross shape, which is on that Syrian stele. It is impossible that this is not signifying total understanding of how the fundamentals of nature work, in my view. Impossible. And so when you then push this forward to the Seta Rotas square, it is the Maltese cross, it is the Templar's cross. But when you rotate, the tenet is something that doesn't change. And the bits that don't change are in the non-radiating boundary. There's no change in those little petals. Okay? That's the tenet. The center is basically the only letter. It's the unique place. This is the Christ center. It's that bit there. Okay? Exactly and precisely. Then this is rotating around this way. This is rotating around this way in terms of its flux. Okay? And when you look at this, if you take these structures and you rotate them 90 degrees, you actually have a vortex that way and a vortex that way, and same for this and that. It's so precise, this. And when you go forward and you translate the Latin, it means the divine creator, in my view, this is my translation from the Latin, the divine creator comprehends and works with whirlwinds. American for whirlwinds is tornado. Okay? There's this phrase which has a Greek A, an alpha, and a 0 with a spot, a Ra, or an omega here, and then rep. And people just thought that this was necessary to complete the thing. But some people do say that this might be alpha and omega. And rep is a shorten. There's several words in Latin that mean repeatedly, which have rep at the beginning. Okay? So my full translation is the divine creator from alpha repeatedly to omega comprehends and works with whirlwinds. And in the book of Revelations, God refers to himself as I am the alpha and omega. And the structure is, by the way, absolutely and precisely the alpha and omega. Not in that part of Greek, but well, you can see it here. This is the omega of carbon with oxygen in the center. Carbon is diamagnetic. The alpha here, that comes down all the way here, is the Sothic triangle. You can see it up here in these ones here. The alpha with a notch in it, correctly proportioned, and the omega is here. That's where all the action occurs. The omega. I am the alpha and the omega. All letters in the all letters in the Greek alphabet have a physical meaning long before we use them in science. And they are the same physical meaning generally that we use them for. And you've got to ask why. What did the Greeks know when they did all those letters? Anyway, so essentially, that is it. The oh no. Do you want to see the bonus?
Oh yeah, let's go.
So this is possibly 10,000 years before Christ. This is around the time that the cataclysm occurred, 11,700 years ago, possibly. This form we've seen both on Solin's work, but also on other work like the line impact of exotic vacuum objects on fused quartz. One of the earliest ones I saw was the yin-yang in this exact shape on the Hutchison ball-bearing sample, which I allowed people to see real time at the conference. And by the way, if you're in Europe, you can come to see the conference we're having in the second weekend in September, where you'll be able to see many Hutchison samples and also analyze them in this way, see previous experiments, and even conduct your own experiments and analyze the material afterwards. So this will be, I don't care what anyone else thinks, you can come along and do it. Right? People can have their debates as whether it's possible, or you can come and do it, right? So I'll talk a bit about that there. But anyway, so this is the core of the ring torus. Okay, this is the bit where most of the action occurs. And on this lamp, which is a thing that produces light, you put your oil in here, you put your wick in here, and you produce light. Of course, a yin or a yang produces light, as I've shown, and it produces light at the center, right? So this is a wheel of wheels, and this is the main wheel, okay? And this is the core of that wheel, the Christ center. But anyway, you have two incoherent particles embossed. They're raised from the ceramic surface, okay? They are coming in on the outside of the vortex, okay? Coming in, and then they come out, not dead from the center, but partially from the center, because it doesn't go dead to the center. It's precise, this. It's not slightly, it's precise. They come out debossed. So these are embossed, these are debossed. So they've actually got a notch cut out, and the same size particles are now in phase. It's taken incoherent matter and made it coherent. This is absolute precise knowledge of the process, possibly 12,000 years ago. Not guesswork. And then this is where it gets very much more interesting. Apparently aliens came to George Van Tassel and told him to create the integratron. And they gave him a design. It has a huge Tesla coil in there. It's made of wood because it needs to build up the static charge. And it has 16 wooden sections. And there are 3 electrodes coming out from each section. That equals 48 divisions. Inside here, you are meant to be able to sit on the upper platform in the center, and there's a skylight here. And you are meant to be able to see all the way back in time and across time currently. It's basically a remote viewing enhancer. Okay? You could predict the future, but it's not you see the future. It's what you see is a balance of probabilities. If you and I describe this like, you've got a guy on a bike. You're sitting on the road. You're walking along the pavement on the road, and you see a guy on a bike, and you see a guy in a car. The guy is on his phone, right, driving along. The cyclist is not really paying attention either. And you can just see that an accident's going to happen. And it's from the balance of probabilities. And it's like, you don't want it to happen. You're totally powerless. You can't change what's going to happen. And, you know, you'll be able to judge that situation. So what it is with remote viewing when you predict the future is what you're doing is you're instantaneously seeing all of the probabilities that are likely to occur, right? And then you see on the balance of probabilities what is the most likely to occur, given the things that you see. And so this would give you the ability to look into the future, but nothing is certain. Nothing is certain, but it's on the balance of probabilities. And it would be on the quality of the remote viewer person that sat in here and whether they could handle the information flux, because this would literally fry your brain, completely fry your brain if you weren't able to handle it.
Have you done this or no? Have you done this part?
Well, I'm a remote viewer. I used to call it clairvoyance, but by my 44th birthday, I realized that one of the names out there was called remote viewing. So that's why I call my blog Remote View. But I knew that I was going to do this work from up in my early years, well before I was 10. I had these recurring dreams. I had to do something when I was 40. I'd earn nothing for it. I'd be chastised and berated for it, but it was my burden to bear. And that was the point of me being alive, right? And I started the MFMP with the other 4 directors on basically on my 40th birthday. And it was basically done by my 50th birthday. So it's, and I had to keep it as quiet as I could, really, as public, free, but as quiet as I could. So it can't be undone, fly under the radar type thing. Yeah. So this is 48. So this is the same process. Now, with any of these systems, as I've showed you, this produces a toroidal moment. Now, watch what happens when I put a D4D structure around this structure with 48 divisions. Mm-hmm. That's a D4D structure, making a D4D structure, making a D4D structure, making a D4D structure. And the top of the windows is exactly precise. This is 48 divisions. This is exactly and precisely in the right place. And the bottom of that structure is exactly and precisely in the right place. And the center point is at the end of those electrodes. Remember, you don't physically have to make this. It can just be a flow pattern in the ether, which self-organizes. So you would just discharge possibly through these, or maybe have a little sphere on the end or something, and it would self-organize this structure. And the amount of etheric matter that will go through that would just be phenomenal. Mm-hmm. I mean, you would literally be hardwired to the universe, to the Akashic record.
Holy, yeah, this is that's next level. Yeah, I didn't know about all this remote viewing. I've read upon them. I actually tried to do. Someone sent me these tapes, the gateway tapes, to try to be like out of body experience, but I didn't work for me.
Well, so I say that, like, you have these microtubules in your neurons, a large amount of them, and yeah, it never worked because they never got it finished. You have these microtubules, and I think the way they work, or the distribution of them in your brain, is based on your cryptographic key, which is your DNA. Okay, and your DNA is a coil of a coil of a coil of a coil, which is the same as that Russian version of the fractal toroidal structure tried to be made by wire. Now, if that's the cryptographic key. Now, you shut down your consciousness when you have a molecule that stops those microtubules from working. That's called anesthetic. But when you have a psychedelic, so you have psilocybin, psilocybe, or you have LSD, or salvia, those cause a wobble in your personal cryptographic key, so that you end up being able to see things from many planes of existence, and also many points in time, and also many other people, but also organisms living on other planets in other times, right? So you can literally experience a freaking dinosaur eating you, because you're experiencing the memory of a small herbivore running around on some other planet in some other point in time, maybe now. And the dinosaurs, and you're literally living that other creature's memory as it was dumped into the Akashic record. And your brain tries to make sense of all these things by putting it into its own frame of reference, its own experiential framework, to kind of decipher the material that's coming in. So you imagine that if you went into an amplifier here and it was working, if you weren't capable, you would literally go mad in minutes. Because it would be like the worst trip on earth. I mean, you could probably be dragged out of it and you'd probably get back to balance quite quickly. But some people just would not be able. It'd be basically like the download from hell. Yeah. It'd be like everywhere all at once.
Yeah, and but you said you haven't been in this one, or have you been in?
The guy died before it was finished. Oh, but okay. What I'm saying is, okay. I think it's correctly made. Yeah. And I think it wouldn't take much to finish it.
Okay. Because that's some X-Men Xavier type stuff.
So a week before I gave my presentation, about 6 days before, I can't remember the name of the person. I will credit him as soon as I can find the email again. Unless he wants to email me, I'll make sure he gets credit wherever. Someone sent me this, which is in New Mexico.
Wow. Yeah, the swastika. Right there.
No, well, it's a salva sticker. It's going the other way.
Okay.
Okay. But what do you see on the top here?
Yeah, these symbols there.
Yeah, looks a bit like a flying disc, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
I won't go into my full description. What else do you see on the page?
Also on the left side there's that X, and there's a
Yeah, it's got a stylized Maltese cross. These are both symbols very important to the Hopi people. The swastika, salvastika, and the Maltese cross are very, very important to the Hopi people.
Yeah, and this is giant. That's 200 feet across. I see the scale, 200 feet. So
No, that's 200 feet for that bit.
Yeah, that's giant.
So one of these arms is about 180 feet.
Yeah, so even getting a straight line that big is hard. and
Yeah.
For that long.
What else do you notice?
The 6 circles on the right side with the box.
Yeah. Anything else?
Well, this what about there's also a circle around this giant line.
Yes,
there.
this here.
Well, that's an external circle. There's one inside as well. There's
There's
another one inside.
Yeah, there's one there.
Yeah,
yes.
It looks like a toroid kind of. But yeah, you have the shape around.
Yeah. And then this line here.
Yeah, and you have.
But this is the one no one has ever talked about as well.
Yeah,
this one here.
So that's giant. So that's 200 feet. That's probably 2,000 feet or so.
Yeah.
Full
I would say more than that.
Yeah, that's unreal.
How many segments do you think there are?
Well, that's a good. Is there? Let's see. There's 1, 2, 3,
Hey, look.
4. Okay, this is a big one. 1, 2, 3, 4. Say 5, 6, 12. I think 12 or more.
No, there's 4 per quadrant, so that's 16.
Yeah,
that's
16,
the same as
I counted up right.
the integratron.
Yeah. This is amazing.
Right, but wait.
There's more.
that's the salvastika moon. Okay, yeah. Wait. The non-radiating boundary is exactly where they've marked these 16 lines.
Wow.
Exactly and precisely, correctly in the right place.
Yeah, that's remarkable. And you have the ejection jet.
Now this was only discussed, the non-radiating boundary, in the 210s, right?
Yeah,
I didn't discover that the non-radiating boundary was a thing until I'd physically found it from destruction patterns in cavitation, in LENR experiments, in bubble structures. Right? Now, I don't care whether this is a hoax or whether this is the Hopi people or the Navajos scratching things in the desert, because this is, guess where this is near?
The Aztecs, where is it? Where is this from?
Well, hold on. Let me just rotate the 3D structure. The apex here, where the apple starts to curve in here, is exactly where they've drawn this box, and the flat line where the UFO structure is exactly on this flat line. And this tangent line, this line comes out from the center here to the tangent. Okay? They have an extended line that comes down from the toroid ring here in this plane. It comes down to the top of the Vesica Pisces. And this ring here is exactly and precisely the size of the sub-tor. Do you understand the significance of this? It's absolutely precisely showing the structure.
Wow.
That is the diameter of the sub-tor. That ring is the outer diameter of the main tor. Sub-tor, main tor. This is in the desert, rotary motion. This is in the desert. Right. Now, I wondered if there was any more. There is. This is another place in New Mexico. Again, you have the sub-tor marked here. This is also, no, this is a swastika. I think it's the swastika. No, they're both salvastikas. This is salvastika, right? Again, 16 subdivisions. You can't see it. It's almost been grown over by the scrub, okay? But it's still there. But that isn't all. There's another one.
Wow.
This is a swastika. Okay, and again, you've got the sub-tor 16 divisions at the right. It's completely gone here. It's been eroded by whatever.
And this one's different from the other location? These are different locations?
Yes.
Yeah, that's unreal.
That is the location. So everyone watching this, get your phone out. You can do a QR code on that.
This leg sticking out, that's the one that kind of tells me that they're doing this. It's some sort of deliberate, like they're trying to get the exact pattern. And at a different location as well. This is quite amazing.
This is mind-boggling because I didn't go back in time and make these things before I found the structure that then proved what the Soviet energetics were doing. Before I knew any of that, before that was made public. I mean, I basically forced the Soviet researchers to throw in the towel. But little did I know, it's drawn out here in the freaking New Mexico desert.
Yeah.
Right. And it's the fact that it shows the substructure with the vector going through the center. I mean, it's just mind-boggling levels of detail. And by the way, you've got a circular bit here, a circular bit here, and a circular bit here, and this bit. You're going to find out that this is a description of how to build a UFO.
Interesting.
I'm not joking. I'm absolutely freaking serious here.
Oh.
There you go. That's that one overlaid. You can see how it perfectly lines up with a non-radiating boundary here, exactly and precisely in the right place. Not slightly, not approximately. It's exactly and correctly in the right place. Okay, that's the other one. Again, non-radiating boundary here, exactly and precisely in the right place. Those are the respective QR codes to go to the location there. Okay.
Yeah, great for having those easier. Yeah, I was gonna type it, but nice.
I've given some bit.ly codes down here, and I've given the longitude and latitude as well. 2 salvastikas and 1 swastika. Right. Now, can someone tell me what the nearest town is?
Is it New Mexico? It's Corona. It's Corona. The other one. Roswell. Yeah, because Roswell, like I made a video actually. Roswell, you know, they all say the Roswell incident. It was actually in a town called Corona. It just said Roswell's the main city. So
well, this might be closer to Corona. There's 3 of them, and they're all within about 50 or 100 miles. But you could find out. Yeah. And I want weaponized autism on this because I only found 3.
Yeah.
And no one's ever talked about this outer boundary, and no one's ever talked about the significance of this being the fractal subtor structure, right? But no one knew. I found the structure from looking under a microscope at many different experiments and seeing why is this sphere cut out of this cavitation spot?
Wow.
And why does it have this lick going one way and this lick going the other way, opposite each other, 180 degrees from each other, but in a like a spiral galaxy? There you go, exactly and precisely in the right place, every aspect of it. And this does not vary. Nature is so perfect. There we go. Again, from the center of the intersection where the apple comes down here and the line out to the to the where it goes from the circle to the tangent. Of course, the apple comes in here and goes up like that, but the actual tangent across, when you're looking at the 3D structure, that's what you can see. And the fact that this is the subtor diameter with showing that the vector is going through there is just, I don't care whether it's the ancient Indians doing us all a favor or whether it's aliens. I really don't care. Or it's pranksters. Yeah. Whoever is doing this knows precisely how nature works. Because this structure that I've got on the screen here is not debatable, right? You can work it out from maths. You can work it out from standard Maxwell equations. It shows the non-radiating boundary. This is the magnetohydrodynamic structure. And guess what? That is the Tesla logo. The safe part is the notch. The Tesla logo, as I proved, is a direct copy of a 1600-year-old Thor's hammer in Helsinki's National Museum. I took the picture last year. It's exactly and precisely a freaking rip-off of Thor's hammer, the most powerful weapon in the universe.
Wow. Even
with the lick down, it's on the National Archive one where it comes into the golden the golden ratio here, comes into the circle, comes in, and they've got the curve up here precisely. Now, I think actually I've got this slightly in the wrong place, because this edge of the ARV should be on this black line here. And when it is, this is the line I showed you earlier, where outside of this, matter is manipulated, not at all, but inside this black line, it's 100% affected. There's an event horizon at this line, right? 100% at this line, there's an event horizon. And that line across there is the height these ARVs fly off the ground.
Wow.
Now,
yeah, that's the McCandlish.
Yeah.
Okay.
there are Herxite quark separated copper capacitor plates here. Okay. And there's 8 or something capacitor plates here. How many do you think are around this flying vehicle?
Is that a 48?
Bingo.
Wow.
Now, if you look at the circle here, this bit out and that bit out, and you project that from the top, I'm pretty certain that's going to line up with the various features on the plan view of that structure near Roswell.
Wow.
This is the 1967 magnetohydrodynamic propulsion apparatus, awarded patent. Corona ring producing charged particles. You need charged particles. Then you have capacitor-driven corona rings to phase, and that gives you your pitch and yaw. Okay, that is the basic structure of that. Okay, here you have the British Railways Board patent for a flying vehicle. This has a nuclear reactor to produce charged particles. This needs an atmosphere. This does not, because it can produce the charged particles necessary for these capacitor plates to be manipulated with.
Wow.
And that's it, really.
Yeah. It's mind-boggling stuff. And
So anti-gravity is real.
yeah, definitely.
In this non-radiating boundary, as defined by whoever draw these things in the desert, it's produced by the fractal toroidal structure, the wheel within a wheel within a wheel. The Maltese cross and the swastika are exactly and precisely the structures that allow you to get it under control, because you need a minimum of 4 for it to be under control. As you see here, a minimum of 4, which has been known for, and given the fact that caduceus was used by the Syrians, and the caduceus is one of the oldest symbols known to man. It's like 12,000 years old. And it is the beam that comes out of this, the 2-point helical beam that comes out of this. It's clear to me that there was a culture pre-cataclysm that knew this technology, and they flew all over the earth with it, sharing the knowledge of how to live a better life. And this would be the same technology that would be developed by any species that was thinking for at least 4 years. That's how long it took me, right? For at least 4 years, not looking at TikTok or something, looking at actually what nature does, getting out into nature, putting a bowl in water and seeing what the sphalico-vortex solitons produce, and then thinking about it. You know, the ionic column is a vortex and an anti-vortex at the top of a column, right? Developed by the Ionian order, which was led by Anaximander. Anaximander studied Egypt and nature. He was the original person that observed nature in the modern era. But this is the technology pre-cataclysm, which people knew it as people knew the wheel. You don't really need a wheel with this. It's an electrodynamic wheel within wheel within wheel. You don't need wheels. You don't need roads. You don't need a lot of energy. You do need to understand that in certain parts of the structure, you will be literally turned into nothing.
Yeah, definitely.
And there is disruption beams, and this will spit out a lot of iron-rich crenellated spheres. And when it's energized up, it'll literally look like a sphere. It'll glow brightly.
Wow.
And so this is what... So I will read you the introduction from Matsumoto's book. You can go and get... This is an original copy, but you can go and get a reprint that we mastered for $9.99. We make about 2 cents on it. It's A4 and it's 297 pages or whatever. And I'll read you the introduction here. And after he realized in 1993 that this was done by ball lightning, right? Ball lightning here. The American Nuclear Society's Journal of Fusion Technology decided that they would not allow him to publish, so they changed the rules. But it says here in the preface, far in the universe, nuclear collapses very often take place by the gravitational force after stars consume their fuel. Since the electromagnetic force is about 40 orders stronger than the gravitational force, it should be easy to induce similar nuclear collapses by electromagnetic force in laboratory. But we never knew until now being 1999, how to do that. Recently, the author discovered a nuclear collapse which was induced by the electromagnetic force in laboratory during studying the mechanisms of so-called cold fusion. Several kinds of nuclear reactions were directly induced by the electromagnetic force called electronuclear reactions. They were found to so far occur in special state of hydrogen clusters called atomic clusters. This is his theory, or microball lightning. The nuclear collapse was one of the most remarkable reactions among electronuclear reactions, called electronuclear collapse. Furthermore, very amazingly, completely broken materials by electronuclear collapse were found to be regenerated again to thin tubes and films of conventional elements. Here's a film of conventional elements, such as carbon, oxygen, and iron. The latter process is electronuclear regeneration. This is real. It's a science. It's a new dawn of an old age, because this is the science that humanity was using until stupid human came about and decided we just need to bash things up and burn things and stuff.
Yeah.
This is working with nature. This is making what you need, what the elements you need. It's using literally the flower of life. All of the elements you see on the screen here are all the elements in your body, and they're made from whatever elements you give it.
Amazing. Yeah. All right.
So if you've got any questions, I'll be able to take them.
Yeah. Well, there was a few. Okay. One person was asking about the Safari project. What's your thoughts on the Safari project?
Do you mean the Sapphire project?
Oh, the Sapphire. Yeah, I call it Safari. Yeah. My bad. Yeah, I just realized what Safari is now. Yeah, the Sapphire project. Yeah.
So Henk Uren reached out to the people running the Sapphire project, where the initial equipment was made by George Hathaway, because that's what he told me when I was with him, and the power supply for the big unit. Of course, they're both in Canada, and you're in Canada. And I think it was a good attempt to reinvestigate these things, which were called balls of fire variously. They seem to take ownership of things that were already published before them, but that's okay too. It's nice to revisit that. They did some good work, and they became Orion Technologies, and they're looking to use it for what it's very good at, which is taking elements and making mundane elements from it. So the good thing that I want to do with this technology is deal with radioactive waste, and there's several papers by Matsumoto to deal with that from the mid-1990s. So a lot of people are playing catch up. The problem is that the core principle of this is you can't make a better thing than nature likes to do itself. And so, you know, a lot of people are trying to take ownership of this technology. So you might have a company that, I don't know, bores tunnels through rock, or has vertical takeoff and landing reusable spacecraft, or does brain implants. And they would be geared up to be able to use this technology in the future and pretend they invented it. And they would come up with some patents, and they would pretend they were all open, but they wouldn't work when anyone else tried them, because they would be using this technology, not the technology they're claiming to use. But they couldn't use nature, because you can't use a physical nature process, right? So you can't use something that nature just does anyway. So you're going to have all kinds of attempts to make beautiful maths to explain this phenomena so that someone thinks that they've discovered something. But it's all going to be either delusion or a straight, flat-out deception.
Mm-hmm. All right. Yeah, thanks for sharing that on the Safari end. And yeah, I'll see how many more. I'm sharing my screen just so you can see the comments. If anyone else has any more questions, and I have one question, because the remote viewing. So what do you like? Can you describe what do you mean by you like doing remote viewing? Like, do you have
I have never tried to do remote viewing. So I'll tell you, it typically occurs to me out of the blue, and I have no choice about it. The first time it occurred that I can remember, I was about 4 years old, and once a week I'd be picked up by my auntie, and she would take us to the toy shop, and I would buy a Space 1999 lander, Airfix model, and I would make this model, and my brothers would steal it and do fake cine videography with it, but I didn't realize that till later. But anyway, she had diabetes. I didn't know what diabetes was. She would also inject herself into a leg with insulin. I didn't know why she was doing that. I didn't question it. What I saw this particular day was her toe, and I just looked at her toe, and I thought about her toe, And I got this overwhelming feeling. Now, what I'm about to say, I didn't know what I was talking about. I just said the words. I said, Auntie Mari, I think you're going to get gangrene in that toe and have it amputated. And she said, what are you talking about? I was a nurse in the Second World War. You don't know anything you're talking about. Anyway, 2 years later, she got gangrene in that toe and had it amputated. Do you understand how that made me feel when I was like 6 years old?
Holy, yeah.
So I suppressed a lot of these things when I observed, because they typically were horrendous global things or things that affected people that I loved. These are typically the things that you would then get insight on. And, you know, I would typically keep them to myself. I was telling my girlfriend at the time, some years ago, about various examples. And she said, well, your next time, you know, it happens, you've got to tell the person. I said, well, that never goes very well. And she said, no, you've got to tell them. So I went to my hairdressers in Burgess Hill, and it's along the road between Royal George Road where I lived and the church that's kind of like due, I guess, east of that. And I'm in there having my haircut done. And this was literally the following day. And so I got this overwhelming feeling. And I go, oh, shit, here it comes. And I got a feeling he was going to injure himself, and specifically on his hand. And he'd been doing my hair for like 7 years, right? And I said to him, I didn't want to tell him what was going to happen. I just wanted to like inquire around the subject. And I said, oh, you're pretty nifty with those scissors. Don't you ever cut yourself, right? He says, nope, never cut myself in my whole career. And I kid you not, within, and like there's 3 people having a haircut done next to me, and there's 3 people doing the haircut, and there's like 5 people behind me, and everyone heard me say this out loud, right? And within a few seconds, he cut his hand in his web, like that, in between his web, quite deep, blood everywhere. Can you imagine what that room was like?
Holy, yeah.
It was so freakish. So I tend to keep things to myself. You know, I predicted the financial crisis in 2007, and I moved country in part because of that prediction. Wow. And that was probably the one that's been most useful for me, because I went from a never-ending mortgage to no mortgage at all, and that allowed me to volunteer.
That's great.
Yeah, so sometimes I get weird ones when there's a lift coming down in a random building, and I'll say the next person to walk out the lift is this person, and I know them. And
wow.
the lift doors opens, and I just chuckle to myself, and I go, there you go.
Yeah. And you mentioned the big one's war coming. You said war is coming soon. Is that what you just...
No, I said after they tried the pandemic, which I pre-predicted, I said I think it was in... I publicly said the next one they'll do is wars. Okay,
yeah, it looks like that too.
But they're working up to it. But people have got to freaking wake up.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, I believe what they're going to do is that they know what's going to come. They actually do know how to fix it, and it is using this technology. But you can use this technology to affect the cleaning of the planet, right? Mm-hmm. You can literally strip it clean to about 70 meters down below ground. Okay. Mm-hmm. And anything will be destroyed. The only thing that doesn't get destroyed is deeply buried carved stone.
Yeah,
if you want to protect anything, you have to put it below 70. I think about 75 meters. I don't know what, maybe, wow. I don't know, but I think it's about 75 meters. You'll have to bury it below ground. Mm-hmm. Because the structures, I've already shown you a picture of a tornado, and I've shown you how big that structure is. And that's not even a very powerful one.
Yeah.
So and it vaporizes anything, like it destroys anything electronic, right? It destroys any PN junction. So any kind of way that we store information these days, you know, paper will survive if it's buried in a cave, right? Because paper it's not conductive. It's you know, so it's good. So like, but if you don't want it, you mustn't get it burnt or flooded. So you have to bury, if you want to protect information, you put it on paper and bury it in a cave, either very high or very low.
All right, we'll do that. All right, so I am. Let's see, I'm losing energy, so I want to go over a few more questions. I have a couple. One from 9/11 Revisionist asking if you've read Dr. Judy Wood's book and if you have an opinion on that. And after that,
Well, Judy Wood does not have a theory. She just looks at the evidence. And yes, I have the book. I've read it. I've actually spoken to Dr. Judy Wood. I think she was a very brave individual. My journey with understanding aspects of this technology came because I started from cold fusion. And after 4 years, I realized it was explained by John Hutchison and Ken Shoulders, and that all together they explained 9/11, right? And I was about to go and present to the Indian Nuclear Authority on how to use how to do low energy nuclear reactions and enhanced reaction in a nickel hydrogen system. And I was presenting at the IIT Mumbai to, I think, 7 students, about the former lead of cold fusion research at Babra Atomic Research Center, Mahadevan Srinivasan, sadly departed, and some current people, I think, and some private entity. And there was one individual that came there, Suhas Ralkar, and that's how I ended up going to visit Suhas Ralkar's lab and take the videos that precisely led me down the journey to look at this as hydrodynamic and then magnetohydrodynamic process. And I got up and I spoke for about the first 2 hours on ball lightning, and then I explained that I believed that this did the Twin Towers. And what happened was that 3 days before I was going, I realized, because I'd spent October in Hungary videoing Dr. George Egli, one of the world's experts in ball lightning. I did a series of videos you can see on a channel called Stardust. There's a 3-part series. It's translated into German as well, if there's native Germans there. And basically, I thinking, well, George was describing these ball lightnings going through a window and leaving a round hole. So I just thought, okay, I see these. As I told you, we burnt cars and mobile homes at the beginning because we had them on our caravan site. People would just leave them there, and we just had fun with them, me and my 3 brothers. And then we would take the burnt out shells to the scrap heap out on the back of the trailer. It was, what boys, what you can do. But I have burnt a lot of cars, or several cars, with petrol, or my brothers have, or bombs. And I never saw the steel melt. But when I was thinking about this in my head, did this do 9/11? Oh, and I remember from those days seeing these cars with these folded down bits of metal. I thought, that's very weird. And I tried to look for those, and I found all these cars on Federal D. Roosevelt Drive, which had, part of it not touched at all, and another part where it was like folded down, like it turned to jelly. And I'm thinking, that's just not possible, right? Because I know how cars burn, and it does not burn like that, right? So then I thought, well, I'm a bit worried here, because I could go and make a presentation, and I'm saying it's ball lightning. And if this did 9/11, I said, all right, here's my watershed thing. I will type in ground zero, round holes, windows, but 9/11 or something like that. I typed in something like that, search into Google. It doesn't work, by the way, now if you do it. I've said it so many times. And all these pictures came up of buildings around 9/11, the ground zero, where they had literally round holes in the windows. And I'm thinking, oh shit, and I swore to myself, and I thought, this is just, I can't believe this is happening. And down in the bottom of the image, I saw Dr. Judy Wood as a watermark, and I thought, who the hell is Dr. Judy Wood? So I went to a website, and it's like 9/11, la 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 la, and I thought, yeah, well, she doesn't know it's John Hutchison. And then I find 3 pages of John Hutchison. I go, well, yeah, she doesn't know it's Ken Shoulders and ball lightning, and there's pages on Ken Shoulders. And I thought, she has come from what she observed as a structural engineer, and by 2007 or 2009, she had realized that 9/11 was done by what is done by the Hutchison Effect. Although I believe firmly that this technology was developed in the 1960s, it's not John Hutchison's fault. It's not anything John Hutchison did that made this come into the fore. It was weaponized probably the understanding was understood in the early to mid 1950s, and it was weaponized by the early 1960s. So this is no fault of John Hutchison's whatsoever, right? And like I say, several other people have observed the jellification of metals, and it was turned into a technology in the Soviet Union, right, in the 1980s, so, or before, right? So both sides had it. So, but the point is that I'm thinking, I was unique in this finding, cold fusion down to John Hutchison, Ken Shoulders, and ball lightning, and she'd come from 9/11, and this explained 9/11. She'd come from 9/11, and in fact, said that this is explained by John Hutchison, Ken Shoulders, and was ball lightning, and it's the same thing as cold fusion. So we came from completely opposite ends, and we met at exactly the same conclusions in all respects.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I had a decision to make, and those were the 3 most traumatic days of my life by far. I had a decision. Do I walk away from this field of research, which I've built a good reputation in, and just lie to myself that I don't know what I know? Or do I say what I know and just let the chips fall where they may? And I decided on the latter, to keep my integrity. I thought, I'm literally nothing if I cannot be honest of something that's literally changed the lives of most people on the planet. Because I'll give you one example. I was 13. I was French, doing my away student study in France. On the way back, I literally came back with a full backpack of explosives, right? I mean, like dynamite sticks like this.
Okay.
From small ones up to ones that were about this big. Right, because you could just buy them at the tobacco store there, and a lot of the time we just blew stuff up in these old abandoned buildings in France with my French exchange, right? And so I showed my passport. There was no security things. They just let me get on the plane, and I literally had a whole backpack full of explosives, right? How times have changed. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's insane.
The FBI will be after you if you had a bag of explosives.
Yeah, of course, I would be an idiot to do anything like it, just because they make something up about you. But the point is that we're living in this world that's been fundamentally changed by those events, and I had to move forward. And it's the best decision I ever made, because I said all these things about ball lightning and 9/11, and then the nuclear scientists were like going, not able to talk to me as they walked out the room after 4 hours. The students were like, what the hell just happened? And but of all of them, Suhas Ralkar came up to me and tapped me on the shoulder, and he says, we need to talk. Why? Because he had seen the same effects in his lab.
Wow.
And so he invited me over there the following day. And that's where and he didn't know quite what was going on, but he was using high intense electrical discharges with water and sound. And so there was a good framework to understand what was going on. And I videoed those hydrodynamic structures, and that led me down hydrodynamics, and then understanding it was magnetohydrodynamics, and the rest is history. And all you had to do was pay attention and not listen to everyone telling you what is possible and what isn't possible. That's all. And this would be exactly how it would occur in any point in the universe. Any sentient being will discover this sooner or later, and it will work the same in all points in space and time.
Yeah, amazing stuff. All right, and with that, I think there's just last question I'll take from an island revisionist. Otherwise, he's just asking, do you know Dean Warwick, and about his claims, and that he died suddenly during presentation in 2006? That was just I'll take that last question. Dean Warwick, does that ring a bell?
No. Sorry for his loss. One thing, when you understand this technology, you literally do not fear death.
Yeah, because
you don't fear death. I mean, you don't feel it at all, except for the loss of support to my family, which is extremely important to me. But you know, what we're talking about is something that's being used to hold dominion over humanity. There are deceivers out there that are deceiving humanity on an unimaginable scale. Like, it literally makes every other deception that's ever occurred pale into insignificance. This is about what we as a species was using, at least in the last civilization on planet Earth prior to the last cataclysm. And to a degree, it's mutually exclusive with a semiconductor environment because it interacts with NP junctions in a not very favorable way, PN junctions. So transistors don't get along very well. But we are designed beings to interact and manipulate this technology. Mm-hmm. Using that same toroidal moment, we can connect with, through consciousness, into these technologies and control them.
It's similar to the Ralph Ring was talking about this, UFOs.
Yeah, because the UFOs are literally made of this technology. Yeah. I mean, I've shown you 3 petroglyphs in the floor in the New Mexico desert. There's probably more out there using symbols from the Hopis. I did this video on Nan Madol, and I showed that there are tunnels or elevation tunnels appearingly going from Nan Madol all the way up to the northern Hawaiian Islands. I've given 2 UFO stories that I've experienced about the North Hawaiian Islands. Long before anyone else started talking about them, I was public about that. What was I going to say? Oh God, I lost my train of thought there. But anyway, the point is, it's done. People need to accept this is a real thing. I do not think these people were ignorant when they were using these symbols and calling them sun discs and calling them God control, the power of God under control. It's exactly showing the structure, and what I'm showing you here is this is the most important unsolved palindrome. Palindrome words in any history. It's like the world. They call it the meme of the ancient world. It's the Maltese cross. They thought it was Christian until they found it buried in Pompeii, right? So it can't be Christian. Mm-hmm. And the divine creator from Alpha repeatedly to Omega comprehends and worlds with whirlwinds, and he does. And it is the God's toolbox, and it accesses every single piece of freaking magic that will ever be able to be accessed. And we do it in our lab. Mm-hmm. And it's only about having the right resources. You see, the Manhattan Project was a lot of the people that can do this are free thinkers, which are rare. Then secondly, they're people that are able to move or can be able to be made to move, right? So a lot of the people are retired and they're able to start thinking because they're not doing their 9 to 5 just to pay the taxes and prepare for dying, right? Mm-hmm. But typically when they're very old, they're so worried about dying, they don't want to travel anywhere, and they've got their cereal in the right place and they've got the coffee in the right place, and they don't want to go anywhere else, which breaks their routine, And young people that are more willing to do that typically have a family, because they're typically people that are quite bright and they get a family and they have responsibilities and so on. What happened with the Manhattan Project? They built a freaking town, and they gave brilliant education. They gave brilliant healthcare. They gave fat ass salaries with a huge pension at the end of it. Everything paid for, and a belief that you were working on something far greater than yourself for the greater good, right? Mm-hmm. That's what you need. And people are so interested in spunking billions on, I don't know, someone not getting elected, or billions on the latest crappy web app or something. I don't know. Just money is spent on useless stuff. Yeah. And there needs to be someone out there, philanthropic, that has a genuine desire to create something to change the human condition, because we basically know how to do it, and it's been laid out in the archaeological record, and it's proven by electrodynamics. It's done. It's done. It's all we got to do is start putting the cherry on top.
Yeah. If only Bill Gates gave us a few billion.
Oh God, Bill Gates.
Okay, last question. Someone's asking, ask Bob if he knows about the salvia archetypes. Salvia archetypes.
No, sorry.
Okay, yeah, I've never heard of it either. And but anyways, I am losing energy.
Well, it's 1:36 a.m. here, so.
Oh yeah, you must be good. Yeah, yeah. So because I eat one meal a day and it's almost dinner time. All right. So let's see. Yeah. Okay. So that's all. And thanks Maggie for the donation there. $3.
Thanks, Maggie.
Yeah. And so that is all. I have anything else, guys? Or actually no questions. I'm just gonna have to head out, guys. All right. Thanks for joining. Do you have any final thoughts for them, Bob?
Yeah, we are at the point of rediscovering the human heritage that powered all of the megalithics and was able to provide unbelievable energy without harming the planet in the last cycle. Possibly a solar mass ejection was the cause of the last cataclysm, or some massive meteorite shower. Doesn't matter, whichever one. It brought the floods and brought the mayhem. But I believe they're going to pull a big stunt between 2032 and 2034, and they're going to find some way of making you believe that it's your fault, but it will not be your fault.
Yeah, definitely climate change.
We need to this great deception. So like, in the Hindu faith, they say that there's this great usurer that is deceiving, and his deceiving forces are holding humanity back from prosperity and long life and achieving their full potential. And it is the god of bull lightning that comes to just vanquish the deceiver and all of his forces.
Wow.
And we are at that moment in time. This literally is Revelations. Everything is playing out as it was written to play out. But it's like a script. It's not like it's someone having a. You see, this is where it's going to sound a bit weird. You can freeze time with these structures when you're in there, because in human chemistry, like, how does time progress? Well, it's like chemical reactions, cell division, death of cells, certain amount of death, and you die, right? You can have spiders that are floating around in the upper atmosphere for like decades, and then they come down, they're reanimated, and if they lived their life, they would die fairly quickly. These structures you can use in theory to freeze time. So you can have people that appear to live for tens of thousands of years, right? They're the same person, but they would go into one of these structures and they'd just pop out every 1,000 years for 10 minutes, find out what's going on, but go back depending on how long they wanted to experience stuff, right? So don't look at these things necessarily as a prediction, but look at them as a playbook. It's literally what we do, and we're going to tell everyone for 1,500 years that this will happen, and then when it comes, they'll all be expecting it to happen. Yeah, right? Yeah. And they'll just literally accept their fate and walk off the cliff and die. Right?
Yeah, it definitely feels like that.
So if you want to know why the world is freaking weird right now, yeah, it's because it's just a game.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's a game that they're playing with our lives, so that's the downside.
Yeah, and we are conscious beings, and they're no different to us. They think they're special because they got access to these tools.
Yeah. So.
And people have just got to wake up and understand that the tools are there. It's been dangled in your face through every heraldic symbol and every symbol of power through all of time, right? It literally is in most of the religious texts, right? What they're saying they could do, they literally could do. And it's not magic, it's just it's science.
Yeah, and it's a lot of movies they show. The movies show.
Oh, I can't watch a superhero movie because it's literally all possible.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's a super normal. They should call it super
normal. Yeah, this could be completely boring for us, but you don't know how to do it. That's what they should call the movies. These are the stuff we play around with, puny humans.
Yeah, definitely. All right, and so. Nine of Revisionist says Project Blue Bean or Blue Beam at 2032.
Blue Beam.
Yeah. No, I know. The blue bean is a giant blue bean in the sky.
Yeah, it's a whole other subject.
All right. Yeah, sounds good. Anyways, I'm gonna end the stream, guys.
Cheers, Matthew.
Thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah. Thanks for joining, and thanks for your predictions there, or clairvoyant or remote.
I don't know
viewing.
what to call them, but I'm pretty convinced something's going to happen between 2032 and 2034.
Yeah, and okay,
Unless we take ownership of our heritage.
Yeah, definitely. I do feel like that as well. Okay, someone's asking about the Mandela effect. He's saying, please ask him your take on the Mandela effect. Is that ball lightning, freezing time, and changing it?
No, it's related. It's related to the Akashic record and uploading information to Akashic record. It's like a super propaganda. So propaganda teaches a group of people so much so that everyone that is genetically close to them believes that, even whether they've got the propaganda or not. It's like what's that guy call it? He's just 100 monkeys or whatever.
Yeah, the 100 monkey syndrome or 1,000.
No, it's not that. It's not about time.
Butterfly effect.
No, not the butterfly effect. Oh, God, I was talking about him earlier in the week, last week. Oh dear. Anyway, it's about where after a while everyone gets the same information that some people have been thinking about.
Okay.
But anyway,
yeah.
Essentially, the Mandela effect would be erasing a memory from the Akashic record in such a high signal rate that no one can access that memory again. So that it's not part of reality, although it happened.
Wow.
You saturate the signal. So these are tools. So yeah, just close out. I would like to share with you. It's called the Alchemy of Prague. So if you give me a minute, I will just bring up if I unshare my window.
Yeah, for sure.
I will share a different window.
We're nearing 4 hours.
Well done.
Yeah.
It's rookie numbers.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the longest I've had was 5.5 hours or so.
Oh, come on, you could do it.
I wasn't the one doing it. It was 9/11 revisionist. He was presenting.
Oh, okay.
He said 2 hours, and then it became 5.
Well, there's a lot happened.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to go here. And we will go. All right, so.
All right.
Okay, so it's down. What you need to type in is bit.ly alchemy letter O. So I'll zoom in and you can see it.
Or you can send it in the chat if you have the link.
Oh yeah, okay. So
up here.
let me try and put that here.
There
you go. I don't know whether I've tried to send it in the chat, but I don't know whether it'll allow because from me.
No, on Google Meet. On Google Meet.
Okay, I'll do that there, and you can send it forward.
There it is, bit.ly.alchemy. Yeah, because it links in the stream. Only moderators can use it. So I have it open. I could show you my screen, so you could see it. Share window. And share. Where did it just go? Oh, it's on this alchemy page there. Okay, I'm gonna move it over there. Alchemy. And
so yeah,
you can see it now.
Yes, I can. So it's Alchemy of Prague. So they go through and to the home of Western alchemy, and they go and do stuff there. And you'll see the guy that invented the Therify and Quantify, and who's also done exotic vacuum object research. And then we'll have a 2-day with a 1-day tour in Brno here in the Czech Republic. And you'll be able to see previous MFMP experiments. You'll be able to see a ball lightning microwave experiment. And you'll be able to see hydro ultrasonic ultra experiment. You'll be able to conduct the latter. And you'll be able to take your samples home. You'll also be able to see many Hutchison samples and be able to look at those under the microscope, as well as other experiment samples that the MFMP has done, so that you will know implicitly in your mind how this is working, and actually have been able to experience doing the experiments yourself. I think it's a very special opportunity to share with people that you know, they just want to see it for themselves. You know, that they're not sufficient with looking at papers, looking at the mathematics. They're not sufficient at looking at the historical record going back many thousands of years. They're not sufficient with looking at formally classified programs and so forth. They actually, the only thing that's good enough for them is actually hands-on, actually feeling and touching and doing. So you don't have to go to the alchemy part in Prague. You can just come to the session in Brno, and there's a video on there that describes some of the things that we'll be doing. But there'll be more material coming. I think the discounts go to the end of the month, so there's about seven days left on the discounts there. So anyone in Europe or anyone that wants to come to Europe in the late summer, it's a great city here. And yeah, so I would welcome you here. You get to meet me. You get to meet Roger Green, who is the first investor into one Italian so-called cold fusion inventor called Andrea Rossi. Well, he's very sanguine about that, as am I, because I wouldn't be involved in this research, and I would never have been able to share anything that I said tonight with you had I not get involved because of his theatrics. So, you know, so like it takes all sorts to make a world, and sometimes you get to the right answers by asking the wrong questions. And you know, we are where we are. And it's a very beautiful future I see for humanity if we take and understand this knowledge and share it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so I sent a link to the chat, and it's $700. You can save up to it if you book by June 30th. All right, and
yeah.
So what's the total cost? Someone's asking for a day of.
I think the whole. I think it's about 200 a day for the main courses. I think if you go down to the bottom, just the Brno pricing is $750, but it's going to be 2 full days with tours on another day. So, and there's various prices of hotels. You can get cheap as chips ones, but all of the hotels he came here and he spent a week, and we went down the hotels and we found the best ones, or a selection of really good ones, all local. You'll go into the town hall here. It's going to be really special. And this is where they discovered X and Y. So, you know, they did the P studies here with Grigor Mendel. There's lots of claims to fame here in the city. They make a lot of the world's scanning electron microscopes here, and you can see ones from 1964 in the Soviet period, which are doing resolutions far higher than most ones that people use today. And they look like 1950s Cadillacs. So anyone who was under the illusion that the Soviet Union didn't have high technology, they're just still suffering from propaganda influence from the Cold War. So yeah, it's going to be real special. I think it's going to be like the Cosmic Summit, but on steroids in terms of having access to John Hutchison and stuff. I've never heard of anyone getting pickpocketed here in Brno. So no, there we go. So someone's saying, "Get your pockets picked in a beautiful city." I think if you look too rich and you look too much like a tourist in Prague, and you fill your pockets with cash, then possibly it might happen for you. Yeah. But I'm not known it happened here in Brno. So
just look like a native, guys. In the wherever you go, pretend like you're a local.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. You know, I went to Mexico. They all thought I was Mexican until I realized I don't know any Spanish.
I always try and look poorer than anyone around me when I travel.
Yeah, and especially because I lost my sandals in Mexico. So I was walking, went to the city, and I was walking with just bare feet. And then, so nobody came up to me. They would all come up to my friends, then ask them to, for the nightclub or whatever, they would try to promos to them, but not to me. They thought I was a local. It's like, I just leave them alone.
Excellent, love it. All right. Well, I'm going to say goodbye. Thank you, Matthew. It's been awesome.
Thanks. Great.
And I'd appreciate recording the stream if you can send it to me.
Yeah, I'll just download it on YouTube and I'll send it over just because I don't want to store a bunch. I'll send you the stream, and yeah, that'll be good. I'll send it soon.
Thanks very much.
Thanks. Have a good one. And
have a good day.
Yeah, guys. Bob's
Catch
gone.
you later.
Bye, Bob. And let's go. All right, guys. That is all for today. And yeah, so Bob's gone. I'm just gonna end the live stream right now. And yeah, thanks everyone for joining. And someone said something earlier, but anyways, that's all, guys. Have a good one. And 3, 2, 1, ending.